We have full board, executive committee, so we have a full board, so we're gonna call it to order at 6:40.
6 minutes.
And I'm gonna take minutes for a few minutes while Dr. John finishes his dinner, because it's not good to rush when you eat, because you get indigestion.
So don't rush, Steve.
So none of you should be rushing. And just, you have to leave me 2 pieces of cheesecake, so don't eat all the cheesecake. So we usually go around and we usually do introductions. So my name's Rich Werner, I'm with the Dover Board, and we'll go this way and then we'll go around the tables.
Emily Long, Leland and Greg, moving.
We'll get the cameraman.
I don't think he heard you. Matt Martin, Windham Central, Director of Technology.
Meg Wright, Windham Central, assistant to Stephen John.
Stephen John, your dear superintendent, nice to see you here. Thanks for coming. Thanks for coming to the Dykes. I welcome you.
And I'd just like to say to everybody, this is Stephen's last retreat with us, unless he comes next year as volunteer, so let's give him a
I might be
quick
haunting
hand.
you. The future superintendent is here as well.
Stephen, how many years in education in Vermont?
Vermont. Oh, I forgot in Vermont. 46 minus 2, 3, 6, 40.
Congratulations.
Thank you.
Follow that.
I know, right?
Jim Carr, Marlboro.
You don't have to stand.
Oh, Selena Romo, Marlboro. Francie Marbury, principal at Marlboro.
Ann Reynolds, Jamaica.
Joe Winrick from Leland and Gray, from Townsend.
Amber Burrow from Jamaica.
Stephanie Amio from Jamaica.
Heather Hellenbeck, Jamaica.
We'll go over to the far corner.
Rosemary Fitzsimons, sports law principal.
Dara Fuller, director of after-school programs.
Deborah Leggett, principal of Townsend Elementary School.
Abby Dillon, director of special education from Central.
We'll go to the back table there. Oliver?
Oliver Olson, state representative for a number of towns, including Jamaica.
Chip Vickery, Dover School Board.
Jolene Mahan, Dover School Board.
Bill Antone, the principal of the Dover School.
Laura Sibilia, Dover School Board and state rep.
Brett Sanderson, Townsend School Board.
Al Clausen, Townsend.
Beth McDonald, Wyndham.
Carolyn Partridge, Wyndham, and also state rep.
Auntie Woodward, Wyndham.
Bruce Parliament, Leland and Gray from Jamaica.
Allie DeFoley, Leland and Gray, Townsend.
Bill Bowl, Leland and Gray from Brookline.
I'm Doreen Dorfman, principal of Leland and Gray.
Sherry Green, Brookline, Newbrook, Ford.
Dorothy Maggio, Newbrook from Brookline.
I'm Scotty Toboshik, I'm the school principal at Newbrook Elementary School.
Ken McFadden, Newfane, Newbrook Zoning Board.
Bud Devonis, Chief Financial Officer.
And we got a couple spectators in the back corner that come to all our meetings and been coming for years and years.
Jerry Dyke, Nancy Dyke.
Thank you.
They can give them dinner.
They had dinner last year. Did you?
Yeah, did you guys eat?
It's good.
Okay. We got to review and approve the minutes from the August 26, 2015 meeting. Could we have a motion on that in a second, please?
I would like to make a motion to accept the minutes from the meeting.
Do we have a second?
Second.
Carolyn seconded it. Is there any discussion? Hearing none, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Any abstained? Oh, you guys are great. We have presented to us at the last meeting, in 826, not the last meeting, but the meeting on 826, policy F30, prevention of harassment, hazing, and bullying. And if you remember, when we adopt that, it's going to do away with 3 policies. It was combining 3. We all went over it. It was, was accepted. We made a motion to accept it. It's been posted for almost 2 months now. Yeah, a lot of boards I know have adopted it individually too. So I would just need a motion that since it's been posted and warned that we adopt the policy. We accepted it, now we need to adopt it.
I'd like to make a motion.
Second.
Hey, Jen, seconds. Is there any discussion? Hearing none, all those in favor say aye. Aye. Any opposed? Any abstained? We don't have to do anything about the other policies going away because that was already discussed,
No,
right?
that was, assumed they're rescinded when we posted it, and that's been clear in all the boards too. So if you haven't passed it at your board meeting, you might consider putting it on your consent agenda. But I know a number of you have already gone through the warning and passing adoption process. So thank you very much. It's good to be all together on that particularly important item.
Okay, so we have some bad news tonight. Unfortunately, we had a really great presentation set up for everybody. Unfortunately,
Nicole Mace, who I think almost all of you do know, probably in person even, was coming back from a trip from Pennsylvania, and her flight got canceled. So with this storm that we were dealing with, they completely canceled her flight. She did just text me when I sat down at the table saying she did make it back to Vermont, but the only place she could fly to was Burlington. So she's now in Burlington. Her car is in Manchester, New Hampshire. She had every intention of being here. I will express what she asked me to do for her, how sorry she is she wasn't able to be here tonight. She wants to be, wishes she could be. She emailed us even first thing this morning when it looked like her flight might be canceled. She sent her PowerPoint, she sent handouts. I think, Rich, am I right? We have the handouts, and the PowerPoint is in front of you. I think, Stephen, you're gonna sort of run that. But we're gonna muddle through without her this time. Maybe we'll be able to grab her for a future meeting. I hope we will. I think you all know she was pretty well booked, pretty much every night of the week, in fact. So we're gonna see what we can do.
so she sent us a PowerPoint. We didn't make copies of this because it's quite a few pages and it's quite a
We
big
can
document.
email it.
But yeah, Stephen has it and Emily has it, so we can get it emailed if you want it, or if you folks want the whole package emailed to everybody, we can do that also.
Unless you tell me otherwise, it's just easy for me to send it to all board members.
Send it to all board.
I'll do that.
So we are going to be presenting it, Emily and I. Any questions you have that we're not sure of, we're going to try to answer. If we can't answer them, we're going to write them down, and we'll get an answer from Nicole, and we'll send that out to every board. We also are one of the things I think we're really fortunate in Windham Central that I don't think a lot of other supervisory unions have, or I may be totally wrong, but we have 4, is there a lot more?
No,
Oh.
there are very few who have.
We have 4 legislators in our district,
As board members.
and we have 3 as board members, and unless somebody talks Oliver in Jamaica into running, we could have 4. But he says he doesn't like to run for office. But anyway, so we've got Laura in Oliver, in Carolyn, and if you guys want to weigh into at any point, because you guys are up there while this is all going on, but we're going to discuss Act 46. So can everybody see the board okay? And I'm probably in some way.
You know where you are?
You can't
You're-
see me.
you're-
I'm in
you should
front
be
of
over
you.
here so that the camera can see you since you're doing the speaking. There you go.
And Alicia was going to be here, and I'm not sure exactly what happened, but usually, the officers try to run the retreat, so that's why we're up here.
We're doing it without her, but we wish you were here.
So, Act 46, Excellent Education, Strong Communities, Realizing Opportunities of Act 46. And this was used at the VSB regional meetings, and Nicole presented this, and I think there was a bunch of people I know. What?
Louder.
Louder?
Yeah.
Wow, I've never been asked to be louder.
Hey, go ahead.
It's really kind of exciting.
Yeah.
He's been dying to yell all night.
Yeah, I want to get on my bullhorn thing. How many people went to the regional meeting down in Brattleboro? I know, Al, I think you were there. I know Newfane was there, Joe. So there's quite a few of you, so if this gets a little boring, please excuse us. But we're starting off with Act 46, and where do we begin? So understand the context. Statewide, there's high expectations for our schools to meet the needs of today's students. Increasing poverty and addiction rates. When the school board, when people from Windham Central went to Montpelier to meet with Nicole and the VSA and a bunch of people, the commissioner or the Secretary of Education, one of the things she brought up was that there's more infants to 5-year-olds in state custody now than there ever has been in the past. That number's increasing, which is something that we haven't seen. Growing inequity in growing inequity in student opportunities and outcomes, significant cost pressures, high leadership turnover. Locally, what are the challenges facing our schools and districts, and how are these challenges impeding our ability to meet the students' needs? So anybody want to throw anything out?
Well, I've been blessed by very strong leadership and consistent leadership among my principals. So I do appreciate that, and I think it's a reflection of the confidence that you have in, the boards have in the principals, but vice versa. So my compliments to both sides of that party. Thank you.
Stephen's experience, though, is not typical in the state of Vermont, and in fact, not even in Windham County necessarily, but we've been pretty good here, and he's right. He's been very fortunate.
We've all been very fortunate,
Yeah.
and our students have been fortunate.
Yep.
The big thing, one of the questions we ask, and you folks all know that I always joke about, I want to be the benevolent dictator of Vermont, and I can't
Not
get anybody
joking. Is
to
that a
vote for
joke?
me.
No, he's not.
Don't let them know it's serious, they might vote for me. Anyways, one of the things that I said to the group when we were up in Montpelier in August, I said, you guys are now the dictator of education in Windham Central. What would you folks do? And a bunch of them really like put up their hands and said, no, we're not answering that. But the Secretary of Education jumped right on that. And she said, you need to look at your school spending. You need to look at your enrollment in the school. Most of them are declining and your spending's increasing. Is that sustainable in the next 10 years? And that was a really good way to kind of frame where I believe the legislature's conversation started, or why we have Act 46, or one of the major points. Next slide. So what do we all want for our children? And this was one of the exercises we've done in Windham Central. We did it in August and September, I believe, where we all went and talked with our board. And I actually had a sheet made up with all our choices or all the things that we expressed. And unfortunately, I brought my own school board bag. I didn't bring my Windham Central bag. I brought my Dover bag, so I don't have it with me.
But it's in the minutes they just approved.
Yeah.
But it is in the minutes.
And if you read through those, you know, a lot of them were very similar. There wasn't a lot of disparity. There wasn't, I think we all want what's best for our students. We all want the local culture of our school. We all like, you know, what we have going on. So we're not all that far apart. I think we all want, you know, to do what's best for our students. Next slide.
That's their values, yeah.
And the community values, we went over that. Did anybody think of anything else, or would anybody like to throw anything out? Moving right along. I like this one.
Yeah, that's me.
Can anybody tell me, was that on the Big Bang Theory last week? So that's a pretty good graph. If anybody knows what it really is, please let me know. But what challenges do we face? I think we just talked a couple of them. You know, Vermont has a decreasing enrollment. Our costs are going up. And our costs aren't just driven by what we do, but costs are driven by what happens throughout the entire state. So, you know, when other schools do things, that really affects us. Where in the old days, pre-Act 60, all the decisions were made local and all the effect was local. As Ann Manwaring used to say, you know, the hand that raises here reaches into the pocket here to pull out the money to pay for it. Now, we could be very conservative. We could all reduce budgets, and other schools, the rest of the districts, the rest of the state could increase their budgets, and that affects all of us. And that adds to some of the confusion too. I know Oliver's had a pretty good slide on how the taxes work and how the money works. The other thing, I've used Al's comment several times from last year's retreat over at the Hermitage, where Al said, if the economy was booming, we were all making money hand over fist, we wouldn't be having this discussion. So it's really, there's a lot of global things that are working both for us and against us. And our decreasing enrollment, you know, not a great economy, you know, higher costs, and just the geography of Vermont. You know, they joke about, we had somebody to talk to us and we're saying how, well, you got to understand, in New York City, there's one superintendent for more students than there are in all of Vermont. But, you know, that's in a really small area, and Vermont's spread out. We've got mountains. Wardsboro and Dover are right next to each other, and I can't tell you how many times we sit, with my police hat on, at the top of Wardsboro Mountain, or Stratton Mountain, and can't let cars over because the road's so bad. and nobody can stay on the road. We have a lot of things we have to fight that you don't have in more urban areas. Other challenges that people can think of, or anybody wants to throw out there?
I think you have a more competitive education. I mean, there's more for education in general with the increasing global competitiveness of what's expected for kids. You know, and this is not just Vermont, but across the country, kids need to get better educated.
And the added piece about the economy and jobs.
Right.
The needs that are out there in the workforce, we need to make sure that we are meeting those needs.
Others?
Everybody else now? Moving right along.
You've got Ohm's law, law of cosines, and Coulomb's law up there in case you want to know, besides Einstein's E equals mc squared. We'll have a quiz on that at the next board meeting, okay? Yeah.
Can we tackle these challenges and better meet the needs of all students? So what limitations prevent us from making our system better? What limitations do we have out there?
Finances.
Money, good. Money's the root of all evil. Anybody else? And that's, I don't know what the answers are. There are no right or wrong answers. Yes, ma'am?
Fragmentation.
Fragmentation, can you expand on that for everybody?
So what we've been doing in Windham Central is working on an aligned curriculum pre-K through 12, especially with our union schools. And this year the focus is on science. The last 2-3 years has been on mathematics.
Okay.
So that has been a limitation in the past that we're working to overcome.
Any other limitations? Principals, administrators, people in central office? Yes, sir.
Transportation.
Yeah, transportation's hard, especially around here.
To go with that geography, I mean.
So if we got a big bulldozer and leveled the whole Windham Central, we'd be better off.
Big iron and flatten it out like Texas.
Yes.
I think another limitation, and it's not one that we've really addressed yet because it hasn't happened, but I think we are facing a lot of teacher retirement. And so attracting new high-quality teachers, and as far as, you know, my point of view as a principal is in our small schools where we have 1 or 2 classes per, well, let's see, 1 or 2 grade levels per class, I need to hire people who know what they're doing. It's really, you know, I need to hire people who have experience. I can't hire people who are right out of college, and so I think that attracting new teachers to our district will become a huge issue.
And I think you guys in legislature, isn't that one of the things, though, the state, one of the big issues with the state is we have a really aging population, and we don't seem to attract younger people. We're seeming to be attracting more older people. And that, yeah, and that second grades beside
The only
Florida.
state older than ours is Florida. I mean, it's not Florida, which everybody thinks, but it's Maine. And it has been Maine for a while.
Wyndham County is one of the oldest counties
It is, in Vermont.
Wow. I mean, that's kind of shocking, isn't it?
Not to me.
I wish that the state of Vermont would put a little more energy into green businesses that would attract young families to our communities. It's very discouraging to see that is not happening.
That's a suggestion on the second bullet, right?
Yeah, how can we change better grade? Abby?
I think one of our big challenges to educate our children are those children who aren't available to learn because of developmental trauma in the family and the severe mental health issues that schools are having to deal with because mental health in our state is diminishing funds, and we're becoming more and more a mental health agency, and which also takes away from our focus as educators.
You know, just something that I've always really frustrates me is, and Abby, you've been doing it for a long time. I remember when it was first involved with the schools, there was SRS instead of DCF, Social Rehabilitative Services, and they would do a lot with students and a lot of counseling. There was a lot of work. And then as budgets got cut, the state would say, okay, SRS, we're not giving you as much money. So they said, okay, we can't deal with 15-year-olds and above anymore. And it got dumped on the schools. And it's, you know, when we say, hey, we're saving money here, what we've done is we've done a cost shift. One of the things that just happened yesterday, I was in the town office in Dover, we had a special town meeting, and the town of Dover got a bill for $160 from the state of Vermont for a stormwater permit for a 6-spot parking lot that they put in for the Valley Trail, or the park. And it used to be municipalities were exempt, but the state needed more money, so now state towns aren't exempt. So, you know, it's just a cost shift. You know, it's coming out of towns. It still comes out of taxpayers' pockets. So those things make it really difficult sometimes.
I don't know if everyone's aware, there's an ongoing study right now with, between the Agency of Education, Health and Human Services, one other, help me out with the other one, to actually look at what we can do to work together to find a way to meet the needs of our kids and communities in a better way. I think that's due in January.
Lots of studies. Anybody else? How can we change, bend, or break those limits? We've talked about a few.
I'd like to point out one thing though, as far as how can we change. This SU has pretty much been ahead of the curve on a lot of these different topics throughout the years, that you guys are doing a great job. Okay, don't let anybody fool you. You're doing a great job, no matter what the state says, anybody else says. You guys are ahead of what's going on in the rest of the state. Just keep that in mind. Thank you. That's all I wanted to say.
As a kind of to make that point, I got to go testify from the Senate Ed Committee, and myself and another parent from Dover, and it was very interesting because we were talking. They said, well, wouldn't it be great if you could share like a librarian because you don't have a full-time, or you can share a music teacher? I'm like, we're doing that. They're like, you are? And they looked at us like we had 6 heads. And they didn't and I said, no, we have this agency fee thing. We explained it to them, and one of the senators was from Bennington. He was very interested. But I've been to some other meetings locally where other school districts have said that to us. He said, well, it'd be great if we can share. And we're like, we're doing it at Windham Central. Why can't everybody else do it? So, I mean, it is a good point.
Well, even Act 46, where we've already had discussions with, we've invited all the other supervisory unions around to come talk before this Act 46 even came about, and what did we get? We got 1 reply. And now all of a sudden, now we have replies because the state's pushing it, so now everybody wants to talk.
Well, actually, we only got 2
positive
replies.
We have 2 replies, so that's better than the 1 we had,
I mean,
right?
to tell you the truth, there was a meeting with Windham Central, and most of the other leadership was officers and school board members and superintendents.
Back in Wilmington, right?
It was, we held it at Twin Valley, and
We had
the Southwest Supervisory Union was
Southwest,
there.
we had Bennington represented.
The only one who wasn't there, I think, was Windham Southeast. They had another meeting that night.
Right.
But most of them did get together.
But nothing came of it except the joint study with SU, right, with Windham Southwest.
Right.
Yes, ma'am.
I think another limitation is purely observational, but I think that towns and the people that live in these towns have preconceived notions of other towns and other schools that are not necessarily accurate. So I think one of our limitations is effective communication and a sort of an effort to break down those misperceptions. And to understand, I mean, people get very territorial about their towns and their area, that at times you need to look at the whole and not so much your specific situation and area, and how can we do that together, because we can only do it
And that kind of
together.
is that 3rd bullet.
Under a statewide
Yeah.
system.
How's we've always been done, an assumption might be keeping us from finding better ways to create a better set of opportunities for our children. Any other comments on this slide? Anybody want to throw anything else out?
Well,
Steve?
tonight you had an example of doing it differently regarding this HHB, hazing, harassment, and bullying policy. Whereas in SU, you really proceeded to get that done on behalf of all the districts, presumably. Now, of course, legally, you still have to adopt it individually because of the way we're governed, but hopefully it cut down a little bit on the delay or the repetitive nature of some of the tasks that the superintendent of the central office is engaged in constantly, both from a financial point of view as well as policy. And that is one of the things where we could think even more differently than what I agree with Ken's point that we've always been pretty progressive and open to improving that situation, but there's more to be done. I'm sure that next year with Mr. Antone, there'll be sky's the limit. But I certainly want to make sure this year I'm getting us off to a great start in that direction. Thank you for your support.
Okay, we all good, folks? Next slide is a picture, yay. Creating pre-K through 12 education systems.
Now this is, this pre-K is really a significant step, both statewide and individually. And I certainly am very proud to report in my other meetings that I've had no resistance from any of my boards regarding implementing pre-K Act 166 a year ahead of time.
I was just thinking the guy on the right with the briefcase looks like you, Al.
All right.
Acts 46, creating pre-K-12 education systems. On or before July 1st, 2019, educational opportunities in Vermont shall provide through sustainable governance structures that provide pre-K through 12 educational opportunities at a reasonable cost.
That sounds like a long way to say what you've said a long time, for a long time, Rich.
Excellent.
What, make me benevolent dictator?
No, about education at a affordable.
Taxpayer, what was it? Taxpayer-friendly budget, education sound, taxpayer-friendly budget. It was Dick Kaufman, may he rest in peace.
All right.
Governance structures are expected to achieve the following outcomes. Provide equity in the quality and variety of educational opportunities, lead students to meet or exceed the education quality standards, maximize operational efficiencies through greater flexibility to manage, share, and transfer resources with the goal of increasing district-level student-to-staff ratios, promote transparency and accountability. Any questions? Moving right along.
Can I just,
Yep.
I don't know that this is related to this slide, but one thing that I wonder in a change of governance, the issue of having to tuition students from one town to another is, I don't know whether that's addressed by consolidation, but it just seems to me that as we talk about providing equity, we're not talking about providing the same thing for everyone. We recognize that our schools have different strengths, different things that we want to maintain. And yet some of those things are good fits for, one child and maybe not so much for another child. And right now we're in a pretty inflexible situation where moving from one town to another is really not an option for families. I mean, the tuition is pretty prohibitive. So just a question.
The answer? Well, clearly if two districts got together in some sort of governance structure, for example, Wardsboro, say they joined with Leland Gray Union School District or a new entity, they would not be paying tuition, to Leland and Gray. And similarly, if Marlboro combined with some other district.
Would Wardsboro pay tuition to Newfane or Townsend at the
Not if they
elementary
were
level?
not if they were in the same not if they're in the same entity under the same governance. That there's no tuition. If you have one board, you have one financial entity. You're not paying tuition among those previously separate towns or separate
Stephen,
school districts.
could you hold that question for a minute too, because we're going more
It's
of that
coming
will
up.
come up later on.
Okay, good.
So
Sorry.
I just and I appreciate you, Steve, trying to get there.
But equity is an issue.
And remember, there's no real good definition of equity because Act 60 was supposed to make everything substantially equal, and that's always a big question. What is equity?
But equity, like Francis said, doesn't mean the same.
Doesn't mean exactly the same thing.
So next slide.
All right, rolling.
So Act 46 has several different structures. The preferred governance structure is a single pre-K through 12 district. They need to serve at least 900 students and has to have one of the four most common structures. And this is where you can only have one, and I think this is kind of where that question was going. You have to operate all of grades pre-K through 12, or operate pre-K through 8, and tuition 9 through 12, operates pre-K through 6, and tuition 7 through 12, or pays tuition for all students grade pre-K through 12.
No.
Non-operating. And Windham Central has one of everything, at least. We have,
And then
Yep.
something else,
yeah.
joint board.
Joint board, yeah.
So we actually have more than the state. One. Next slide.
Once again, we're ahead of them.
We're ahead of the curve. Act 46 has 3-pass implementation, accelerated transition to preferred governance structures. That meant we had to start in June 2015, and by June 2016, have to have been all voted and ready to go, and start July 1st. There's conventional transitions to sustainable governance structures. They're not the preferred. And those you have from June 2015 till July 2019. And then there's self-assessment, quality reviews, and a statewide plan, and that starts July of 2017 and goes through June 2019. And that's still being worked on, or is that all?
Well, it's in process. The first pilots are being run this fall. There'll be 3 more in the winter, and then there'll be maybe 5 in the spring. I believe Windham Southwest is doing,
You're talking about the ed quality review.
yeah, wasn't that what they're talking about there? Quality reviews.
I mean,
Self-assessment,
I mean,
quality reviews, and a
that's just-
statewide plan.
But this is put into 3 different paths to implementation, so this is the alternative.
Oh, okay.
Actually, that
Thank you
last
for
bullet
that
is
correct.
what-
That last bullet seems to me to be pertaining to everybody, but,
It's 3 paths.
right.
Path 1. Path 1. Accelerate transition. This person does not want to accept it. I don't want to talk to
Want me to handle it for you?
them. Third time they call. By July 1st, 2016, the electorate approves a plan to merge all member districts of a supervisory union into a single education district. It could include a merger with a neighboring supervisory district. The new district has to have a minimum ADM of 900, be operational on or before July 1st, 2017, and agreed to provide data to the Secretary of Education in order to evaluate the impact of the merger on quality and cost. I was just going to run through this. If anybody has a question, raise your hand. We're going to run through these slides, because then what we're going to do is we're going to pass out a matrix that has all these listed and move on to the next part of the discussion, which we were going to do after Nicole got done with hers. Is that okay with everybody? So path 1, accelerated transition. Accelerated measures are intended to produce a Vermont-specific research base on the process, design, benefits, and opportunities associated with districts operating at scale. Support supervisory unions that have previously undertaken significant planning activities related to merger, and support supervisory unions that are configured in a manner that lends itself to expedited merger process. Incentives, everybody's heard about the 10, 8, 6, 4, and 2. Districts can realize the full reduction in the first 5 years. New districts will keep any small school grant. Transition facilitation grant of $150,000 or 5% of the base. Keep the 3.5% hold harmless protection for declining enrollment, which otherwise will be eliminated in FY 2021. And exempt from the requirement to repay a portion of state construction aid upon sale of a school building. Path 2, conventional transitions. So the law also provided, because they knew that not everybody would be able to, or very few would be able to. I think there was 5.
I think at the time when the law was being written, there were 10 or 12 that were identified as possible to move forward. I think more than that have looked into it, like maybe twice that. Looked into it, we'll see how many actually come out of the accelerated.
So path 2 is conventional transition. Law provides incentives for action if a merger plan meets the red criteria or any variation of Act 156, an MUUSD or side-by-side, and is approved by the electorate by July 1st, 2017. Districts are able to merge into a preferred structure that is operational by July 1st, 2019, are also able to obtain incentives. There is no deadline for a vote from the electorate.
Just make sure you understand, when you hear preferred, there's a difference between the preferred that Rich just spoke about and the accelerated preferred. The accelerated has the 1-year window and the deadline for the vote.
Just lost my thing. Okay.
Don't forget.
Act 153 of 2010, and isn't that what you guys did your red study under?
Right.
We did.
Yep.
It
So-
was
156.
started with 153 and then morphed into 156
156.
when the legislature passed 156 in the middle of the process.
So everybody's familiar that there was a red study done with the Leland and Gray towns. I think, I know Emily was the chairman of it. Was there other people here that were involved with that? So there's quite a few of you. So there is some experience, and I actually read the report after we started getting to this. It was a really excellent report.
It's on the website, anybody hasn't seen it.
So school districts that merge create a union school district are eligible for incentives if they result in a district that has 1,250 ADM unless a waiver is granted. That's why it's nice to have 4 or 5 legislators on the board. Or was created by merging 4 school districts, or districts do not need to be members of the same supervisory union in order to create a RED, and a RED shall not close any school within its boundaries during the first 4 years after the effective date of merger unless the electorate of the town in which the school is located consents to closure, and it has to be approved by the electorate prior to July 1st, 2017. A lot of people are very scared about losing and closing schools, and I believe even you guys found in the red that you can write into the articles that no school can be closed under the red.
Without a vote of the electorate.
So, I mean, you can go beyond that date in the
Yes,
in the
we
agreements.
did, we said for in perpetuity.
Right.
Just
Yeah,
because
go
you
ahead.
went and said it, it's not legislators who give grant waivers like that, it's the State Board of Education, just so you know.
But legislators could pass a new law that
That's
says
true,
if you
but
meet
they don't
these
grant waivers.
requirements, then you
That's
have to be
true.
given a waiver. You guys got power. Okay, Act 156 of 2012, side by side. Each new district is formed by the merger of at least 2 existing districts. One of the new districts provides education in all elementary and secondary grades by operating 1 or more schools, and the other new district or district pays tuition for students in 1 or more grades. Each new district has the same effective date of merger. The new districts, when merged, are members of 1 supervisory union, and the new district jointly satisfies the red size criterion, 1,250 ADM or 4 districts, and it has to be approved by July 1st, 2017.
So theoretically, Newfane and Brookline can get out of this whole deal by turning around, instead of being a joint contract board, turn into a contract board, and we're just covered.
Or take the contract out, you're a joint board.
Right.
Yeah, you could be a union, you could be a union district, which is 2 districts combined.
All
Which
right.
would qualify you for those incentives.
So Rich, I just want to point out, because there's been a lot of misinformation and confusion around the issue of school choice and districts that want to preserve school choice. This provision, the side-by-side provision, is really kind of a key piece to, for those districts that want to preserve, either preserve operating a school or preserve choice, but don't want to sort of commingle districts of different flavors. This is really the key to get there.
I don't think I'd be speaking at a school, but just Windham Southwest has Wilmington, Whitingham, they have a union school, a joint contract school, and then they have 3 towns that are K-8. Halifax, Stanford, Reedsboro. And what they're looking at now is the Halifax, Stanford, and Reedsboro are having meetings to do a K-8 district, and then Wilmington and Whitingham are looking to do a district and get rid of the contract in their name. And that would be kind of a really good example of what Oliver's talking. And then the third, the free radical on that one is Somerset, that has not operating school. They're all tuition, and they would stay that way. Searsburg, I'm sorry, what did I say?
No,
Somerset.
Somerset. Yeah, it's one of those towns.
What's an S, you know?
Yes.
So would a side-by-side district have 1 board or 2?
There would be, if there's a side-by-side, it would be at least 2. Because it's,
Each side would
Each
have
side
their
would
own.
have its own school board?
It could be more than 2, it could be
Right.
3 or 4.
Could be
And
many.
it's basically, there's a supervisory union, and then there are as many districts within that
Right.
to sort of merge like with like.
As long as there's 2 for each one of those.
Yeah.
in Windham Southwest, there would be 3, because if the 3 K-8s combined, that'd be 1 board. If the Wilmington Whitingham would be a board, and then the non-operating would be a board.
Of Searsburg?
I'm not,
So you know.
I'm
if
not
you-
sure whether Searsburg can stand by itself in the end.
If
It
you-
may be assigned.
The point is, if you erase all the lines around supervisory unions, for example, and say, you could actually have a side-by-side with 2 or 3 non-operatings, 2 or 3 K-6s, 2 or 3 K-8s, and 2 or 3 or more of any of those K-12s or pre-K-12s. So, it's up to the group. As long as there's two to merge.
Is everybody
I gotta
good?
keep my coffee going
Yes.
here.
Is currently Windham Central most like what we're talking about in terms of the multiple boards and the K6, K8, K12?
Windham Central currently has the Union High School, which is one board. It has a joint contract board, which is the Brookline
But
Newfane.
they're under the
But they-
Union High School as
right,
well.
they're in the Union
So
High
there's no
Right,
School.
but I
choice
mean,
there.
of all of the scenarios that have been presented so far, that
No, it's
seems,
more than one.
am I incorrect in thinking this seems the most like us currently?
There's nothing like us.
We have everything. That's the
Are
problem.
you, if your question is this one, does this seem most likely compatible with the way we've set up today? It's up to this group to decide that.
Yeah.
Well, it's eventually, ultimately be up to the voters of the towns.
Right.
Right, but
They-
it's up
they
to
have
this
to
group to
approve
decide whether
today.
they want to pursue a study to present to the towns. And the communities are involved, by the way, in those studies.
It's
Did
a
that answer,
long
that make it
process.
as clear as mud?
I'm having trouble understanding this particular component, and I wonder, is it too edgy to ask one of you to give us an example using our own district of a way that this might work? You know,
Yeah,
I
you
don't
could,
wanna
I
push
think the
anybody.
example, the easiest example would be the Leland and Gray towns are one board.
Pre-K-12.
Yeah,
Pre-K-12, then you could take your pre-K-6s and have them, there's two of them. have them
Dover and
one board.
Wardsboro.
The challenge comes for Marlboro, as they well know, that they're the only K-8 in our SU, so there is no other like district. So the opportunities for them are to walk a different path than the rest of us, or they could say, we want to operate K-6 and put exercise choice for 7-8 instead of the way they do it now. Or Wardsboro and Dover could say, we've decided we want to go K-8 like Marlboro is, and they could, exercise choice only for 9-12. Then the three of those districts could get together as long as they were offering the same operation for all of their students. It's something that everybody needs to talk about. Stratton is on the outside of that. Stratton is non-operating. Stratton is also, they're not here tonight. I was hoping that maybe somebody from Stratton would come, but I know they're in conversation with other non-operating districts to see about whether they want to join with others that operate just the same way they do.
So what would make it a side-by-side is that within the same SU, we had like one board for the Leland and Gray
As-
towns,
right.
one board for, say, for instance, Dover and Wardsboro.
Right.
And that would qualify it as a side-by-side.
Who would- As long as there's two in each.
May I point out?
Except that we don't have, that doesn't equal 1,250 ADMs.
It's okay.
Because we're gonna get a waiver?
It's not,
Because we
no,
have-
because they're side by side. There are
Oh,
other.
okay, the four districts, okay.
But by you turning around
So
and
we're
saying
four
that the
districts.
Leland and Gray School of 5 districts could be one district, basically you're talking about the original red, which we
Right.
studied 4 years, as you remember.
Yes.
And we came to the conclusion that it wasn't fair and equitable for all the towns and nobody wanted to do it for different reasons. Each town had their own reasons. So
But to
I'd
be-
just like to point that out, that by saying the K-12 Leland and Gray schools,
But to be fair, and following up on what Ken's saying, if any of those towns decided they didn't want to join, say Dover didn't want to join with Wardsboro or whatever, the end of this, the difference between what Ken's describing under Act 153 and 156 is that, you just continue to operate the way you did before. Now there is a end to all this, and the state board will make decisions about any districts that are not orphaned. And so there are, you're getting to the third option under alternative, so people can have that conversation as well.
Remember too, nothing happens, like, nobody decides, and that was one of the big things in this, was that, nobody can make you give up anything. If you had choice, it can't make you give up choice. If you had a school, they can't make you give up your school. The only thing they can do is if you choose to do nothing, they can, the State Board of Ed is able to assign you somewhere where you may fit better.
So the important part of that is that the Agency of Education will draw a map, and any orphan districts will then be recommended to the State Board of Education to be assigned to a specific district. And then the State Board of Education will make the final determination on what happens.
And that was one of the reasons for us to approach other districts too, because if there is somebody that was kind of left out of a plan somewhere, the State Board of Ed could say, hey, you guys have this really great idea, but guess what, we're adding this to you. So we thought it would just be good, us as a group thought it'd be good just to talk to the other districts and see where everybody is, and hopefully we will get that eventually. Yeah.
Does the state have a target number of boards that we want to reduce to? No.
I've never heard of them.
I've not heard any specific.
I'm just wondering
Stephen,
how.
what did you say?
I hadn't heard of anything specific. There was an alternative piece of legislature about 16 supervisory unions, based on the career centers throughout the state, but that didn't.
Yeah,
that didn't prove.
Remember though, the state's trying, again, the legislators gave us they were really good. They could have just said, hey, we're gonna do what we wanna do, or, but they didn't do that, because, and I think it would have been hard to get past. You maybe discussed it. There's been propositions in the past just to mandate something, and the legislature's always fought that for us, and they said, no, we want you guys to decide, and that's what the whole red thing was about. It was about offering a carrot rather than a stick, and we've heard that for 5 or 6, 7 years now. They'd like to see some. The state really feels, or the people in the power really feel that we have very low student to staff ratios, and with everybody having their own little school systems, it's really hard to share staff or move people around. So that's why I believe, and I'm not a legislator, but I think that there was a lot of incentive to try to get people to do it instead of forcing people to do it and see what happens. There's a lot of pressure. I think every legislator and everybody complains about their property taxes when they get their tax bill, because it's no longer just in the town, like we said earlier, whatever decisions are made in Burlington affect your pocketbook. Decisions that we make affect Burlington. So it's all over, and that's I think the idea is the legislator said, let's get everybody talking. So
many of the conversations that happened in House Ed as we were discussing, draft legislation that was coming across and listening to witnesses nonstop every single day, was that I believed, and I'm pretty sure the whole committee did since we went this direction, that local voice is critically important to the future of public education in Vermont. And the law that was passed allows local voice into the conversation. In fact, requires local voice in the conversation. It encourages and requires conversations in your communities about what you value about education and public education and what direction you would like to go. We all know all of our communities, even in Windham Central, are very, very different from each other. We all have our own culture, and we should be having this conversation about what's important to all of us.
You okay? Ready to move on, folks? Next slide. Act 156 of 2012. Modified Unified Union School District, and this is that super almost mud. If all local elementary school districts in the member towns of an existing Union High School district vote whether to establish a unified school district providing pre-kindergarten or kindergarten through grade 12, and if a majority but not all of the elementary school districts vote in favor of establishing the unified union school district, then a new modified union school district shall be established that shall A, provide to the students residing in the member towns of the union school district education in the grades provided by the union high school district, and B, provide elementary education to the students residing in the current elementary school districts that voted in favor of the unified union school district. And it has to be approved by the electorate by July 1st, 2017. And my tablet was too small. Get it all. Path 2, conventional transition.
But does everybody understand what that meant, or what that example would be? Okay,
there is one MUUSD in the state, right?
But
one rec.
An example of that could happen in RSU is that, once again, the member towns of Leland and Gray Union High School, local high school district, maybe they wouldn't all vote in favor of a pre-K 12 unit. So if one didn't, then that would cause this to be formed automatically.
So path 2, conventional transition incentives. Homestead tax rate reduction of 8, 6, 4, and 2 in the first 4 years. Tax rates can't increase or decrease by more than 5%. District will keep any small school grant currently received. Yeah, everything else is the same.
Yeah, you don't have to read that
So,
again, do you?
yeah, thank you.
Very on that
Everybody
one.
good? So the only basic difference is you don't get that first 10 cents.
So 4 years to the fund.
Okay, path 3, self-assessment, quality review, and statewide plan. Districts that do not take action to reorganize themselves voluntarily and will not do so by July 1st, 2019, are required to take certain actions prior to November 30th, 2017. School boards must evaluate the district's ability to meet the state's goals and meet the other school boards, and meet with the other school boards in the region. District or group of districts must submit a proposal to either retain its current governance structure or form a different structure with other districts or otherwise act jointly, joint contract school, to the Secretary and State Board of Ed. The proposal should demonstrate how the district will be able to achieve the goals and must identify specific actions the district will take to achieve goals. So, self-assessment. The Agency of Ed will begin conducting education quality reviews and site visits to evaluate districts' abilities to meet the educational quality standards. The agency will monitor activities related to governance and keep the State Board of Education appraised of progress statewide. And based on the results of the quality reviews and governance activity, including proposals submitted by districts, in 2018, the Secretary will develop a statewide plan to transition all districts to sustainable governance structures. Yes?
Aren't the education quality reviews going to be happening,
Yes, they
with all
Regardless.
schools?
Yes.
But this is
happening by
indicating
SU.
just path 3.
Right.
I'm a little confused.
I think what's the difference between what you're saying and what you're seeing up here is that it's identifying the criteria on which they will be basing this third phase here, this path 3. So ed quality reviews will be one of the criteria that they're using as they are identifying.
And the education quality reviews are being held on an SU basis,
Right.
not an individual school basis. So it is pertained to this, path 3 in terms of when the State Board of Education has to decide or the Secretary has to recommend some kind of restructuring. It has to be based on some criteria, not just whim of the map.
Although the ed quality reviews will be done at the district level, they're reported at the SU level. They'll be done
Yes,
at both
there is a review in each school within
There
the
is.
SU, but it is an SU-wide review.
model.
Yeah.
So statewide plan will be adopted by the State Board on November 30th, 2018. Implementation of transition effective July 1st, 2019. Statewide plan will not require districts to lose choice or require districts to pay tuition. The statewide plan will not include the following districts: interstate school, regional career tech centers, and districts that voluntarily merge into the preferred governance structure or a structure eligible to receive red incentives by July 1st, 2019. Financial consequences, see,
Hang
there's
on a
no
minute.
benefits.
That means if a red were formed, it would be protected from being reassigned, is that what that's saying?
I think it's saying that nobody will be, if you will not have to give up choice, or you'll not have to go
Right.
become tuition. You can keep your school or you can keep your choice. That's what I read in that.
Is that right?
Yep.
Everybody agrees right on their head there?
Everybody okay with that?
Yeah. Okay.
So financial consequences. Districts that do not engage in voluntary structural changes will not be able to secure tax reductions. That's at 8, 6, 4, and 2. After July 1st, 2019, these districts will only be able to retain their small school grant if the state board determines they are geographically isolated or can demonstrate academic excellence and operational efficiency. And that's an or. After July 1st, 2020, these districts will also lose any 3.5% ADM hold harmless. That's those phantom students a lot of people were talking about. And July 1st, 2017, supervisory unions found to be out of compliance with Act 153. Centralization provisions will see a 5% tax penalty. So, a long time ago, they said to supervisory unions, if you take over special ed, transportation, this and that, and if you don't do it, there was a big article that most of you may have seen about Pownell. wanting to do its own busing, transportation, and they were told no.
It was reviewed by the Secretary of Education, found to be more expensive operating their own busing than it was to operate with the SU. And so they were told they either have to join the contract with the SU or they're gonna get that penalty.
We operate I've obtained waivers for 4 school districts regarding their own bus systems, and as long as I can make the argument that that's cost effective, it'll probably, gain approval.
So what are our options? Oh, next slide, Steve.
Oh, yeah, sorry. By the way, I do know that we probably will have an example of producing more Phantom students in this SU, at least in one school district, if the projections of enrollment hold.
Okay, so what are our options? And thanks, this goes back to what we started talking about earlier. Merge all member districts in the supervisory union to form a single pre-K-12 district. We would have to vote by July 1st, 2016, and be operational by July 1st, 2017. That's really seems a long ways away, but it isn't.
That's the accelerated.
That's the accelerated, that's the 10-8-6-4-2. Create a district that meets the preferred structures criteria. You are not limited to working with districts in your SU.
Unlike the accelerated.
This option could involve giving up current choice or operating patterns or moving some districts to different supervisory districts and supervisory unions. And if you are an SU that has a blend of choice and non-choice districts, create a district SU that meets the Act 156 red alternative criteria. And we need a vote of the electorate by July 1st, 2017. And that was the question that we had a lot when the legislation first came out, wasn't that a big to do? If you could blend, some people said no, you couldn't blend, and some people said you could.
I guess that there were some who questioned that. I mean, it was never in the law choice and.
So that's the side by side?
Well,
It's not what he's talking about the choice.
yeah, and just to clarify, Rich, that was not an issue with the supervisory union, it's within the school district. So all the controversy has been, there is an SU up in Windsor County. What they wanted to do was to create a merger of choice and operating districts together, and they wanted to operate a public school and offer school choice at the same time. You've never been able to do that. You cannot do that.
Unless you're Vernon.
Unless, there's a carve out for Vernon, but generally speaking, you've never been able to do that, and there's nothing in Act 46 that allows you to do that. There were some people that came to the erroneous conclusion that somehow you could do that, and they tried to do that. The State Board of Ed, correctly in my view, said, no, you can't do that. And there's all this controversy, and people are freaking out thinking they're gonna lose choice. Relax, you merge like with like, and you get to keep it.
Can I just add to that an example, like a very concrete example? So that would be like, say, Wardsboro and Stratton wanting to merge into one governance district. So Stratton has all pre-K through 12 choice, and Wardsboro operates an elementary school. You could not do that, and you've never been able to do that. But that is the only thing that you cannot do.
But I think that was a big thing that came up, so just so, does everybody understand that?
I think it's really important to get clear on that point, because it does seem to be the point across the state that people are really freaking out about the most.
So a lot of this came out because there were people who said they wanted to take advantage of the accelerated incentive. So I think what's really important to understand is that while these are called incentives, they've been called incentives for a very long time. The financial tax rate relief for those 5 and 4 years, depending on which model you're looking at, are not intended to urge you to go in and make everything so much easier for you because you've lowered your tax rate 10 cents. It's really to offset the challenges of bringing multiple tax rates into one. Some school districts, as Ken would love to be able to share with us, and I'm sure will, who are low spending, merging into a district with some high spending, there is going to be a few years of challenges around this. These tax rate decreases that are called incentives really are supports for those school districts that are meeting the challenges of merging. So I think a lot of people looked at that 10-cent thing and said, oh, I want to get that, and I'm going to move forward with it. But the law was, I'm not going to speak for the Senate, because this came in under the Senate, not under the House. It was never in, it entered into it after it left the House, the preferred accelerated. In fact, preferred came in later, and so did accelerated. But that was never the intent. Even in the Senate, that was never the intent, to merge districts that didn't operate or tuition the exact same way.
Is everybody good with that? And again, remember too, we've been meeting since June about this, so I think our supervisory union's got a huge leg up on a lot of other ones, because we've been having conversation. There's other ones that haven't had, there's some that still haven't started talking, so. What are our options? Page 2. Develop a plan to achieve quality and cost objectives through changes in the SU operation and configuration, and submit a plan for consideration to the Secretary by November 30th, 2017. The SU should be able to demonstrate an ADM of 1,100. The smallest number of districts practicable, operates in a manner that maximizes efficiencies through economies of scale and the flexible management, transfer, and sharing of non-financial resources among the member districts. Member districts consider themselves to be collectively responsible for the education of all pre-K through 12 students in the SU, or pursue none of the above options and wait for action by the Secretary of Education and the State Board. Next page, considerations moving forward. What more do we need to better understand Act 46? Anybody need anything? Private counseling, tutoring, a visit with Ken in the back room? How might we leverage Act 46 to create a better system for students at a sustainable cost? Oh, somebody's got to have a good one for this one. Okay. Who are our neighbors? What opportunities might exist for partnering with districts outside of our SU? What structures and process shall we engage in to move forward with this work? And how might we engage our communities in our work? And then the next slide shows resources and support for the study. And then the last page has contact information. It's got Nicole's phone number and Nikki.
Yeah.
So,
Yes.
We'll leave it back on that slide just before that, if you would.
Yeah.
I think it might be helpful to actually walk through those studies just so people have a sense of that.
Well, so where we were going to go was we were going to have Nicole here to do this part of the presentation. And then, so you didn't have to listen to the same people talk all night. And then the officers were going to lead a discussion, where do we go? Where does Windham Central go? So what we have is, we've got, so we're going to give you some handouts, okay? So
on the overhead, do you want this up with it, maybe?
I don't think so. Let's use this.
Let's
maybe
use the handout.
for you.
Help handout.
So we're going to have a handout that we're going to give you all, and it's got all the different possibilities. And where I thought, or the officers, when we set up this meeting, thought it would be good is to go through them and see which ones that we think we may want to continue to look into. We thought we may want to even see about getting a study or hiring a consultant to do a study with us, but unfortunately we're missing a couple boards, so it really is something that we almost need to hear from all the boards. And so why don't we take a handout, why don't we take a 5-minute break, why don't we go till 7:30, let everybody get up and stretch, get something more to drink, the bar's open, and we'll start at 7:30. If everybody's got it, we'll have it up on the board. So the first one you have on page 1 is the preferred. This is single district, one board, one budget. Many schools, former school districts. Single pre-K through 12 district, minimum of 900 students. All member districts of the SU must agree to be part of the new district to be eligible for the accelerated incentives, which remember is basically that 10 cent to kind of equalize the rates out. Operates in one of the following manners: all pre-K through 12, pre-K through 8, tuition 912, operates pre-K through 6, and tuition 712 or pays tuition for all students. There's a single tax rate for the entire district adjusted by the CLA, common level of appraisal. That's that number that drives everybody crazy because if you're over 100%, your tax rate goes down. If you're under, it goes up.
And it could make your tax rates go up even if your spending went down?
Yes. So this is a program that Brattleboro is possibly looking at doing because most of them are members of that union district anyways. And I believe they have a vote coming up sometime soon. So
they hope
They actually are all members.
The CLA is by town, right?
Right.
Yes, it is.
CLA is determined by the listers submit a grand list, and then the people in Montpelier, the appraisers come down and they look at it and they say, hey, here's what your CLA is. And you can actually argue it. Dover's argued theirs a few times because we have a lot of sales. Some towns don't have as many sales and it's harder, so ours moves around quite a bit. This model is, so I think earlier on, one of the first questions we asked is, what could we do or what would we look like? So for us as Windham Central, and the only way we can do this is as Windham Central. We can't do this as, bringing anybody else in or anybody else leaving. Or we could do it with leaving.
We can't do it under the accelerated.
So under the accelerated, the only way we could do this is we all have to be the same. So
And we all have to be in, including Stratton.
Right. And this is the one where we were all going to be the same cow, like Stephen used to have the cows that he was trying to herd. So you didn't bring them, did you?
So what it means, well, they're on his time.
So what this means is those schools that have choice would have to lose choice. Those schools that are part of Leland Gray District, we'd have to dissolve the district. We would have to do one thing altogether. I think it's important for us to have a conversation and just see if that's something people would like to try to do. And the only reason I'm saying that, I don't know if any of your taxpayers have talked to you, but I have had several taxpayers in Dover say, why aren't you jumping at that 10 cent? So I said, well, we can ask the question.
So he's asking the question.
Is
Raise
there-
your hand
is
if you
there-
want to try to move forward.
Is there any interest in trying to become a pre-K through 12 district? And I'm not saying what the district is, we're not saying.
No.
Wendell has a question.
Yes, who?
Wendell.
Wendell, oh, I'm sorry.
And now this would have to be voted on in the town meetings, wouldn't it, in March?
Yeah.
Which puts a big time crunch.
Huge time.
In March or earlier. March would be the latest if you take into consideration the opportunity for a revote.
I have to say, for me, this makes most sense. This accelerated.
Pre-K through 12 accelerated.
Right, within the Leland grade.
It doesn't make sense.
Okay.
But it's not just Leland and Gray, you
No,
understand.
No, it
All
has
of
to be
Windham
everybody.
Central.
Yeah, it makes sense in many ways.
Yeah.
Sharing services, the whole thing. Ron Staley sent us out a whole list of the advantages in a draft. They're big. Better services, special ed, foreign language, higher quality teachers because you can hire full-time, sharing resources.
Yeah, and see, we do a lot of that too. But
Yes, you do.
Let's get
Yes,
off
you
of
do.
that and let's just, is there interest in us trying to do it? So we have one person that's saying yes, one person saying no. I know you mentioned shaking your head no.
Doesn't make sense.
Marlboro, not interested. Okay. I think with that many, is there any interest besides the one person we heard? So we can pretty much take that one off the plate. Is everybody okay with that? Nobody's gonna shoot us? Okay, you can take that and you can make a paper airplane of it. Page 2. Who was that guy who used to go, Paul Harvey? Page 2. Single district, one board, one budget. This has to be a single pre-K 12 district created by a merger of 4 districts that can be advisory. Be aware of the goals of Act 46 when proposing a merger that will result in a district serving fewer students in the preferred structure. Also be mindful of the potential for creating a stranded district. You do not need to be members of the same SU and a single tax rate for the newly formed district adjusted for the local CLA. You get some benefits, some transition help, and you also get to keep the small school grant if you had it, and you get to keep the 3.5% hold harmless that would otherwise be eliminated in FY 2021.
And since we don't meet the criteria for, is it on here 1250?
Right.
Is it on here somewhere?
No,
Should
it's on
be.
the other one.
Since we don't meet that, we would have to have 4 districts to form a red.
Is there any interest or thoughts into looking at that? That would just be one group, because then it would still be a side by side, because what do you do with everybody else?
Without changing governance structure to get four, the only school districts that actually could form a red in Windham Central would be those who are part of Leland Craig. Because otherwise it's not enough. You have to have four districts. You could do it, but you'd have to change your choice or operating model that you're in today.
So it would have to be Townsend, Newfane, Jamaica, Wyndham.
Newfane, Brookline, Jamaica, Townsend, and Windham are the five. So four of them would have to do it.
Four of them would have to do it.
4 out of 5.
Or somebody else has to want to get it.
Or somebody else could go in.
Correct.
And the only problem with that Newbrook has is the cost per pupil is going to go up 5% until we equalize with the other 2 districts. And it creates this, I said this down in Brattleboro at the meeting.
You also said Townsend.
Yeah. And now I'm saying it amounts no.
Let's bring it up. So one of Ken's issues is that Newbrook has worked really hard to reduce their cost per pupil, and everybody else is higher than Newbrook right now, the Newbrook contract district. But that again is why they have the transition amounts in there, and it's also their thought is that everybody would be able to get back down to the lower number because there'd be more sharing, just like because you guys are sharing, your numbers are lower than they were before.
But our budget wouldn't go up no more than 5% a year, which is about $100,000 a year. And that
What was 8 cents by?
Well,
And the 8 cents.
and the 8 cents supposedly, but then see that incentive goes away.
Right.
So it's kind of like a buy. So basically, what they're saying is, you're going to go no matter what. You're going to go up for 5% a year until it equalizes out
Maximum.
maximum until it equalizes out between all the districts, and then when that happens, Newbrook can turn around and say, we don't want to do nothing and just wait for the state to say, okay, well, we're going to put you here 4 years down the line and save 15% if it's going to wind up costing us 20% more. I mean, it's like an act of piracy, and then you get what you get. But the fact of the matter is you're still saving 15% in the long run.
I think the thing to also remember, Ken, is opportunities for your kids.
Oh, absolutely.
No,
Absolutely.
I recognize the concerns around the dollars, and I think the idea of the incentives is that it will help stabilize the tax rate for those transitional years. At the end of those 5 or 4 years, there should be operational efficiencies that will stabilize everything, at the same time increasing educational opportunities for kids.
There should be. There's
That's right.
there's no guarantees there.
There isn't either
should
way.
be,
That's true.
There,
There's no
there are
guarantees.
other ways to find within a district to save money. Dover's doing it, Newfane's doing it, Jamaica's looking into it as far as solar power,
We're doing that anyway.
renewables. There's other ways that in the long, it's not you could save money, you will save money. And these particular districts are being proactive and making something happen, not only to help their district, other districts, and their taxpayers. And when mom and dad are having a tough time paying their taxes, and then you're bringing their taxes up to give a possible better education by changing the structure. That 5% that comes out of their budget, whatever, I don't care if it's $34. $34 a month in some houses makes or breaks your budget. It makes your car payment to get you back and forth to the soccer games. It breaks your budget on, your one outing to the movies a month or whatever, your family time. It makes a big deal. And by us going in wholeheartedly or blindly, oh yeah, we're going to get stuck doing it anyway, so we're going to do it. It just doesn't seem right. It doesn't seem fair to those families that it's going to impact, that's gonna take away from another part of the family structure, that it's all about the school. Another problem is, too much is on the schools where the families aren't responsible for anything anymore. In a lot of,
Unfortunately,
we can't do anything about that, but well, we can as individuals.
And let me just remind everybody too, you know, because I really enjoy the financial part of Act 60 and 68 and all this stuff, which makes me a little sick. But don't forget too, there's still, I believe that there hasn't been any changes to the homestead exemptions in the percentages. I think those are all staying the same, aren't they?
Yep.
So homesteads are gonna have it shouldn't affect them that much. If it goes up, it's still paying based on their income. Unless, again, I've always disagreed with the house and 2 acres, because to me, that's not Vermont. Vermont is a house in 20 to 100 acres, you know.
It's also important to remember that none of us know what our future looks like for sure with our tax rate. I mean, you are enjoying a lower tax rate than others in Windham Central right now.
We've been lucky, we've been blessed. We've
I'm not arguing
fallen
that
into
point.
it every year, I'll be honest with you.
Okay.
We come out, we fall into it, we come out smelling like a rose. We have this big energy cost, big, you know.
But at the same time,
$1 million loan and everything else, and special ed costs went down, so our budget stayed the same.
right. But at the
And
same
you know what?
time, we're all vulnerable.
Thank you, keep it coming, that's all I gotta say.
We're all vulnerable, and some of us are actually facing much higher increases. I know Townsend's had their struggles with it as well, so with higher increases. So, you know, it's a balance across the board, no matter what.
It's hard, I understand that.
Yeah, go ahead.
My question was, didn't we establish in several years of red study that a red would not really bring about any kind of cost savings? I mean, wasn't that the consensus?
I didn't read that in the
No.
report.
I mean, that was what my understanding was. The only point that, I forget his name, made was, would make
Drew.
sense because of the distances of the schools in that red was a unified elementary school, which really raises the cost because there is no elementary
So
school.
here's what happened at the end of that red study, and I you know, it actually never finished. It actually went on hiatus. If everybody who was on the committee remembers, we sort of decided to not take it to the towns for a vote at the time, because at the same time, 883 was in the House and being discussed, and it was, we thought there was going to be something that came out of 883. We didn't want to go forward with a proposal that didn't seem to be generating enough interest in the 5 towns if there was going to be a change coming down the road at the end of that 1 year. So we decided to not do anything with it. And that's the status of where it ended. But referring to what you're saying, Antje, where the challenge came was actually pointing, this is specifically where we're going to save money. This is how we're going to save money. And the reason why it was hard for us to make that determination was because the study committee was not going to be the board. The board was the one who was going to make the decision that was going to be elected at the same time that the 5 communities voted on whether the 4 who were, they all 5 voted, but there were 4 that were necessary at the time, what that school district would actually look like under that red model. So were we going to share staff? Well, how were we going to share staff? There were a lot of possibilities that were identified of increasing opportunities for kids and reducing costs, but we couldn't say specifically at the time what it was going to look like. I think those things have changed today, and I think that a study needs to be done, and I think we need to be looking at specifically what will we look like if we're going to move forward with any kind of merger under any of these scenarios. I think we have to have more specifics. So
Well,
I don't
my
think that your
recollection
assessment
was,
is right.
I mean, it's been a few years, but my recollection was that it all looked great on paper. We can share resources, we can share teachers, and then all of a sudden we realized that there's about 20 miles between one school and another, that making that sharing logistically is impossible. And so I even remember a public meeting at the Windham School where, to my recollection, even you said there are not necessarily any immediate cost savings related to a red.
What we said was we couldn't identify any specific ones, that's correct.
Right, and so
Because we didn't know what it was
thinking
gonna operate
red
like.
would end up in a one-way street once again. I don't know what the difference would be, it's still about
Well,
the same distance apart.
I think the difference was that wasn't the reason we went into the red in the first place. The reason we entered into a red, and if I'm wrong, others will correct me, but the reason we entered into the red study was not because of saving money. We entered into the red study to look at ways we can increase opportunities for kids, at the same time trying to stabilize the costs that we were all seeing and still are, in fact, in the education of our kids and our individual parents.
Remember, one of the things that one of the first slides we did on this was, it's not really about saving money, it's about educational opportunity for the kids. So we need to kind of try to think that way, and that's what the legislature, I believe, asked us to do. That's what the act does. I think there's some hope that if we can offer better opportunity, and even if we kept the money the same, if a child has more opportunity with that, it may be, it could be a real plus. And remember, we had the commissioner, the Secretary of Education at Dover School I don't remember when, Laura will probably remember. One of her comments is this isn't about big cost savings. This is about a lot more opportunity. And she's also said several times, or said at the meeting we all went to up in Montpelier in August, is that a lot of it revolves around high school more than elementary schools. Because, it just as an example is, my kids went to Wilmington at the time, there was 2 languages. They could take Spanish or French. At the same time in Brattleboro, they could do Spanish, French, German, Latin, and then there was a 5th one. That was the opportunity. My son wanted to play football, so if he'd gone to Brad, he could play football, but then he couldn't play like basketball at Twin Valley. So that's the kind of things I think they were trying to get us to look at too. And remember, it's we're trying to, again, the education sound taxpayer-friendly budget. If we had what we all wanted, and money was no object, we'd spend $1 million a child and give them anything they wanted. They can go any country they want to study. Obviously, that doesn't make a lot. That won't work. But what's the happy medium? And I think that's where we need to look at it. Again, a lot of us, I don't think there's anybody in this room that could say that their school's doing a poor job or a bad job. I doubt I could get anybody to say that, and I'm not saying that we are. We all think our school is the best, and we're doing a great job, and we're doing everything we can and doing the best we can. The question is, can we do a little better? We just had a community meeting, and I kind of got in a little bit of trouble. I took a little bit of offense because a parent said, oh, well, maybe there's something we're missing and we're not doing. I'm like, we do everything in Dover. We're great in Dover. We're the greatest. But no, there are things that we maybe all could do better. And I think that's the way we need to frame this or look at this. Remember, we're just looking at it. We may come to say, there aren't that many new opportunities without a huge expense. But if we haven't at least looked at it, then we haven't done our job. And we all may say at the end that we want to do nothing. And, I've said doing nothing is not an option. By doing nothing means not discussing it. Again, we may decide that the best thing for us to do is for all of us to stay just the way we are, or maybe, do a little bit more. I don't know what, but I think we need to look at it so that we can say to our voters, to our students, to our parents, and to our taxpayers that, we research this, we left no stone unturned, and we feel that what we're recommending to you is the best.
And if I could just follow up briefly on that. Act 46 actually is much more flexible than, it offers more opportunities than 153 and 156 did for people opting out and all that. The difference though is, at the end, if you do what you just said and say, I'm not going to do anything, you run the risk of being assigned to somewhere. But there are opportunities for you to prove to the state board and the Agency of Education that you are doing perfectly fine the way you are. So that's what I'm trying to say. Under Act 153 and 156, there were some pretty severe limitations. When we talk more about the study and union school districts and all that, I think we'll start to recognize a little bit more of the flexibility around Act 46. At the same time, I think there's a lot of criticism about the flexibility in here. Why aren't you telling me what to do? This makes no sense. There's too much leeway. But, and I understand that challenge around it, but it just means a lot more work for all of us. But it also means that we get to decide, and instead of Montpelier decided for us, so.
So we got, basically there's 4 choices left if we want to do either one of those 4 choices. And we've kind of reviewed them all.
You should mention the side-by-side because it's part of
Yeah.
the conventional merger.
So the side-by-side is page 3, right?
Yes, it is.
The page 3 is the side-by-side. Each new district is formed by the merger of at least 2 districts. One side operates all pre-K through 12, one side tuition, some are all grades. Somebody I think asked earlier what fits our supervisory union. Again, this is probably one of the closest ones that would fit us.
Rather than side, conventional.
Rather than the conventional, the side-by-side.
Well, can you have a side by side by side?
Well, we were told
You actually
yes.
can, we just talked about that.
And that wasn't that discussed down in Brattleboro too?
It's also-
So,
Briefly, yeah.
right, pardon?
Yeah, we just talked about that.
Yeah. So there's 3 or 4 options in here, and what we were kind of, like I said, if we'd had all the school districts here, I was hoping that we could maybe come to some kind of consensus on if we want to study something, which one we would want to study, and maybe move forward with the study. The other thing, since we took the accelerated kind of off the table, it gives us a lot more breathing room, and it gives us another year or 2 to breathe, or to work on this. So, I don't know, I would really love to hear from each board, and we've heard from New Fame, we've heard from Windham, but I don't know if there's other opinions in Windham, where everybody's at, and then hopefully, one of the next few meetings, maybe we can warn that here's where we'd like to go, or here's what we'd like to do, or we may want to take a break for a month or 2 on this and let it settle out a little bit. It's, whatever you folks want to do, whatever the boards want to do, but.
Well, you're gonna hear from Newbrook again. Or New Fame. I'll keep the girls out of it here. Just in case they don't agree with me. The side-by-side version, I'm willing to look into. I'm not like totally against this, don't get me wrong. I do understand there could be some savings down the road. I'm not gonna shoot the dice and gamble on, well, the state says it's gonna work for us, and, because it don't work that way half the time. So, side by side, I think is a great thing to look into.
That's confusing to me. Is it about savings or is it not about savings? I'm not, it just.
Well, I'm not a legislator, I can't tell you what the vote was, but no, it wasn't about savings. I think there was a
Quality our goal is a quality education.
I just think that's a big thing.
There,
we
there's
don't
a
wrap
tax-
our head around.
huge
with
piece
a
that is
taxpayer
being
friendly
ignored
budget.
about savings, and that's a big section of Act 46, which we haven't talked about.
Let's get Laura and then Oliver.
Cost containment is built into this law, just so you know.
Don't get me wrong, I'd like to see it.
So in my opinion, this really, in my opinion, really evolved over the session and even after the session. I really think this legislation came about because of inequity of opportunity in our schools. And that is what it is aiming to fix, to provide a framework to fix. I think that legislators as a whole were very clear that the voters wanted to see some property tax reductions. So I think you'll find various opinions in this room about the extent to which this is going to reduce property taxes. I think that as a means of ensuring there was something done to address property taxes, we ended up with the flexible cap at the end, which everybody loves. Everybody loves that. I will say it was the better option. The other option that was being considered would have been particularly hard on all of our smaller schools. So that's what I have to say. So we'll see what Oliver has to say, and then I might have one more thing.
Wow. Be careful, Oliver.
Yeah, no, I think we need to look at the value of what we're getting for what we're spending. And I think that's where there's real opportunity. We spend a lot of money on education. Personally, I don't mind spending a lot of money on education but I'd like to see us get more for what we're spending. And I think that needs to be the real focus. How can we spend our money more efficiently so we can provide better, more equitable opportunities for students? If we can glean some savings that can be returned to taxpayers, that would be great, but I would just love to be able to get more value out of, the $1.5 billion that we're spending today.
Okay, hang on a second, Laura, please. Carolyn, would you like to comment, because you were up there too? I know it's not in your committee, but do you have any thoughts or insight for us?
Well, I think I have a bit of a historical perspective. And this conversation started back when Jim Douglas was governor. And we started talking about the fact that we had decreasing enrollment and increasing costs, and that we needed to do something about this. And there were a number of efforts made, but really the focus was on money. And then I think that there was sort of an adjustment, kind of a mind shift, and it was, well, we can't just be talking about money, we have to be talking about the students and the quality of education. And so it sort of evolved, but I agree with what Oliver says, I agree with what Laura says, and Emily. But I think really, what's really pushing this is the feedback from taxpayers. They'd love to be paying less in taxes. If it wasn't, if the economy was great, we wouldn't be having the conversation. I forget who said that, but
Al.
Al. But I think that I just feel like we haven't really laid out the goals and the principles, and I was hoping that would happen more this year in the education committee, but the leadership didn't exactly do that. But there were two kind of goals laid out, Emily, and one was cost savings and increased opportunity for kids. And I still have to be convinced that, and by the way, Rebecca Holcomb talked about this being more of a high school problem, that it was not so much of an elementary school. Small elementary schools could offer great educations, but it was more of a high school problem. So Oliver has some interesting ideas about this, and I just feel like, I don't know where all this, who made this up?
We all did.
Yeah, but it's like anything put together. I don't know. I don't have your thoughts here.
Wait, everybody, hang on one second.
Morning is actually my better time for
Yeah.
things like that.
So, that's why the Senate meets in the afternoon on education and something else in the morning. Let me, Emily's been acting as a Windham Central member. Let me ask you to put your legislator hat on. Do you want to throw out any thoughts you have, and then we'll go back around to Oliver?
Sure. So,
Just
I
to
mean,
be fair.
I have a historical perspective, just like Carolyn, it's just that mine isn't legislative historical, although I've spent quite a number of years up there testifying to the Senate, to both the Senate and the House Education Committees over many years now. And my first encounter with this conversation happened in the Jamaica School back in, I don't remember what year it was, but it was maybe 2000, something like that, when Commissioner Kate was on his walkabout around the state to talk about his proposal for changing our governance structure. And that's when I first realized that there was a push from the state level to get us to look at the fact that we were going to be facing, and we were at the time starting to face, some declining enrollments. Our costs were fairly high. Vermont has always valued education to the point where it really didn't matter to us, and I think it still is the same way, that it's not what we're spending, it's whether we're getting value out of what we're spending, along with what Oliver was saying. So this goes back a long way. There's been an awful lot of proposals out there every year. Like I said, I've been up there testifying over and over for years on different proposals that have come, including 883, which didn't get out of the House, for good reason. I testified against it. But, and I had plenty of arguments around 46 too, and anybody who sat in there, and I know Oliver sat in that room quite a bit when he heard our conversations. But what really has driven this is the fact that while I recognize the challenges that people see in this law, there's still that line, and she didn't include the graph in here, but the fact that our costs are going up and our student enrollment is going down. And it's pretty severe. And the reason why legislators, including me, when I was running for the House, heard over and over again that something's got to be done is because it's really pretty clear it's no longer sustainable. I'm going to throw on my VSBA hat as well, and we had this conversation quite a number of years about, do we as school board members in the state of Vermont want to be a voice, and do we want to take control and action on what our future is going to hold? And the VSBA board did say, yes, we do want to participate in this conversation because we don't want the legislature to tell us what we are doing in our communities. So that's sort of the pushback on this. I mean, there's been a lot of conversation around opportunities for kids. The fact is that we are not the same schools we are today that we were even 5 years ago. And we have examples of it over and over. And I sat in House Ed listening to people coming in and testifying, witnesses day after day, telling us about the challenges of meeting the educational needs of their kids because of declining enrollments and increasing costs. It's happening everywhere. There are, not in every school district, but it's happening all over the state of Vermont. Children are not receiving the same opportunities and certainly don't have equal access to opportunities as they had even 5, 10 years ago. That's what's driven this conversation over and over. Costs have entered into it because costs have gone up as enrollment has gone down. We have heard over and over, we need to do something about lowering property taxes. But the real drive and the real conversations that were going on in House Ed all winter, and it was pretty hot and miserable in there, and I remember most minutes of it, were really about how are we going to make sure our kids are getting the education they need to graduate from their schools, our public education system, career and college ready. And we have a lot of challenges that we have to face, and this is an opportunity for us to have that conversation and say, what do we want for our future, for our kids, for our citizens, for our society? And I think it's a really wonderful opportunity. I'm happy we dumped a lot more work on school boards and communities, in fact. I don't want it to be driven from up above. I don't want the state to say there is 17 school districts around the state of Vermont, because I don't think that's close enough. I think that we are close enough to each other in this room. We're separate school districts right now, but I think we know each other. We've worked long enough with each other for long enough that we're still local, and I'd like to keep it that way.
Yeah, Emily asked about the goals.
So there are goals in the law.
These are the three.
Which Stephen has
The
pointed out.
legislation is designed to encourage and support local decisions and actions that, and then there are these three goals.
It's number 2 that I think is really important to focus on here, because we do have new ed quality standards, and we do need to meet ed quality standards in this state. And the ed quality reviews that are going on, the models, Stephen spoke about it before, they're going on right now. The first, what do you call them, the volunteer districts who are participating in the process. Wyndham Southwest is one of them, I believe.
Educational quality review.
Education
For the ed quality review teams. That's going on now. Regardless of Act 46, we were told very clearly those were going to happen no matter what. Ed quality, the state's ed quality standards were in place before, they've been in place a couple years now. Ed quality reviews came out of that. So we're all going to have to respond to that.
You know what I would like to, I used to say this to Abby years ago, which is, we don't want to meet those expectations, we want to exceed them.
Great.
So I would even just eliminate, we want to exceed them because we can do better than what they set for.
That's what the goal says.
Right, well, they say meet.
It says achieve or exceed.
Achieve or, no, we want to exceed.
Okay.
We don't want to meet, we want to exceed, okay?
Laura, you wanted to comment, so. And then I'll get to you, Oliver, we'll give Carolyn one last part. Are you all set?
She's thinking about it.
Oh, go ahead, Oliver.
I don't think, I want to say on the record, I think there's an opportunity here. I think there are a number of opportunities. I think there are I think we had a public meeting with our public in Dover. And in Dover, they were talking about how, of course, Dover is so awesome. And the schools, you know, to the left and the schools to the right are also aware of how awesome Dover is. Of course, they would just choose to shut down their schools and come to Dover. Dover's got road. And we said, well, you know, you might be surprised to find that some of those schools think exactly the same thing. And so, you know, one of the opportunities, I think, one of our parents, and in Dover, we congratulate ourselves an awful lot. We actually get great outcomes for our kids. We've got a lot of things to be really happy about. So we always, you know, we congratulate ourselves. But we had a parent in the back that said, and really kind of had us all pause, said, you know, I would never send my kid anywhere else. I'm so grateful to have my kid be able to go here. But, you know, if this is about opportunity, you guys need to start thinking about, what aren't you doing well? You know, how could we be better? So I think that is an opportunity. I would say, I think that there is an opportunity to save money here. I don't think we have not mandated saving money here, because we haven't changed the funding mechanism. And so I'm not optimistic, without changing the funding mechanism, about seeing a decrease in property taxes. I feel like I just need to put that out there. And that may be okay. I mean, I think the value, I'm gonna tell you, I think the value question is a very important question. If we actually have, and our citizens believe we have the best education system in the country, and that's something that we can, you know, and they feel like there's value for it, we'll be in good shape. I am aware that voters want to see property tax reform. I would like to see property tax reform, but I think there is a real opportunity.
Mr. Olson, sir.
So I just want to echo, you know, Carolyn's comments. You know, you know, you have to look at this, and I'm sure everybody's head spinning. I've looked at this a million times, and I still have to go back and get myself reoriented. It's incredibly confusing, and you know, if we could design a system from scratch, we wouldn't do this. Right? It would be really easy. We would take a map and we would draw some lines. And if, to Emily's point, if the state was going to be doing this, they would just take a map and draw some arbitrary lines. The reason this is so convoluted, is because what we have in front of us today, as it exists today, is a very convoluted system. And it's akin to untangling a bunch of Christmas tree lights and trying to get them reorganized. It is not an easy task. It's a really big lift that we've asked of our school boards and our communities. But again, to Emily's point, the alternative is something that may sound really simple, but probably wouldn't result in the outcomes that we would like to see. The other, you know, again, to pick on, you know, Carolyn's point, you know, I think, you know, when I look at you know, some of the disparity in the opportunities that we have, and going back to the value question, you know, it's a real issue with our high schools across the state, and that's what keeps me up at night. And you know, I've thrown out, you know, again on the value question, you know, if you do a comparison, you know, we do a great job in Vermont, but last year New Hampshire, for a significantly less per pupil expenditure on a statewide basis, their students outperform Vermonters on the SATs. And some people don't think that SATs are an important indicator, but the NAEP scores that came out today also show for 4th and 8th graders that they have higher NAEP scores for both math and reading. So again, this gets back to the value question. We're spending a lot of money on education. How can we spend it more effectively?
Ask New Hampshire to adopt us.
Carol,
hang on one second, Jeffrey.
I guess I want to say that I love what Emily said about thinking about what we want for our kids. You know, not every child should probably go to college. So, but there are skills, you know, my friend's daughter's a hairdresser and she makes as much as my son does, you know, who is a veterinarian. It's not a matter of money, it's what you want to do. But I don't see how this, making us choose one of these scenarios that these guys came up with, is going to help kids do better. I just don't see that. And the other thing that has always frustrated me is, we are spending more and we do have decreasing enrollment. Why? Why is that? And is it because we have a bunch of teachers hanging around that we just can't fire because of the union? Or is it because we are doing mental health and you know, and feeding and everything else for these children who are not getting what they necessarily need in their homes? So I'd love to have that question answered.
So that's, will hopefully be answered somewhat with that study that goes on there, along with the special ed study as well that's in the law.
You know, Senator? Go ahead.
So I have been thinking about what we might be able to learn from our experiment with after-school programs.
With what? I'm sorry.
Our after-school programs do operate as a shared resource among almost all of the schools in the SU. And so we are now moving into a phase where there's going to be even more of a flexible pool of resources that people are contributing to, a pool where we could adjust according to the need. And I think that's one of the positive pieces I see in terms of possibilities in some of these models, but the details of which direction people might choose to go in, that's where it becomes unclear what some of the unintended impacts might be. But some of the things that just are sort of bullet points in my mind, from the after-school programs, when we think about trying to share instructors, the point Anja made about the geography, I think is really significant. Trying to think in terms of groupings where there's a reasonable distance for people to travel, or for kids to join in with other, extracurricular and after-school programs. What's a reasonable distance for them to travel? So that's one of the things. Equity and access have been prominent in our planning around after-school programs. Trying to close some of the gaps because, for example, the transportation costs are huge. But some of our schools are kind of locked into a transportation route and share those expenses, but some schools are not linked into that and run their own bus system or don't even need to, which means they can have more programming because they don't have to be scheduling things around that bus program. So that's one of the factors, I think, is when people are joining together or who gets left out, the equity piece comes to the fore. So just these key points about how we are grouping around geography, what that means in terms of cost, and from where I sit, working across all of these schools, making sure that all of the opportunities that are available in any given school exist at other schools, and sometimes that means additional resources are needed to make sure that you can meet the needs in that community. For example, recruiting teachers, making sure that the highest quality teachers are willing to travel to any of these schools. Are there additional supports needed for that? And I also worry about the special ed piece of this. And I'm not an expert on this, but it's just something that is coming to my mind in terms of what are the implications when there is a unified district versus separate districts for those costs, and students who suddenly move into a community and then costs go up. What is the impact within that community? It's easy for people to know who those kids are and why there are costs here, and yet these are our kids across all the communities, and is there a way to share with a shared pool so that it's not a burden on any particular community for the benefit of all? So those are just questions from the experience of the after school that is essentially a unified district in many ways.
And that's one of the things you said earlier is we're doing a lot of stuff that this law kind of envisions, and a lot of people didn't realize that we were doing it because it doesn't happen in all districts. Listen, everybody, we're a little behind. We're supposed to end this about 8 o'clock, and we still have one more important thing to do. So what I'd like to ask is there any other questions or any other comments? And then Emily's gonna move us forward a little bit, if nobody has a problem with that.
I'd like to say that there's been a lot of talk about opportunities and our students who struggle the most. As you mentioned, there are students eligible for special education. You also mentioned about students with mental health issues, which are starting very, very young. People with the highest number of students, children in state custody under age 5. As well as students from low-income families who are only going to have access to the opportunities that are provided at the school. And these are the students who are at greatest risk when they are not part of a unified school system. That when there is a great disparity about the educational expectations of programs between elementary, middle school, and high school, they have the most to lose, and they do lose the most. And they also are very dependent on their better prepared peers who have more support at home, who have access to more opportunities to do summer enrichment, things that they need themselves, who are brought up higher because of their more advantaged peers. And that is the promise of public education in America, and that is something that we're working very hard within the Leland and Gray Union school system. And I just wanted to make that point to everybody.
Thank you. So I think we're kind of, I don't think we're even anywhere close to being able to see if we want to do a study or see which way we want to study. So we thought maybe we just review and kind of just go over the 4 different choices that are left and see. Yes?
I'm sorry, I have to jump in and say, to me, as I look through all this, the side-by-side seems like the only real option for us, and I'd love to not go over all the other ones again. And like, let's look at this, you know, and settle into that possibility, because I don't really see any other option as viable for this supervisory.
Does everybody feel that way?
Yes.
We didn't talk about the last page, which was the alternative, which a lot of people, I understand, but I think it's important to note, because I'm not absolutely certain every school district feels that they need to do something. And I don't want to speak for anybody else, I don't really know. But I think it's important. There's a lot of people who say the alternative is doing nothing, but that's actually not true. I mean, and you should look at this page. I don't need to read the whole thing to you, but under here, you know, there are specific criteria that need to be met even under the alternative structure. What you don't need to do under alternative structure is actually merge with another district. You also don't need, you also will not be entitled, because you're not merging, to the merger incentives.
Any of these incentives?
Right.
You'll lose the span of the small schools.
Right, the small schools and all that. A couple of important things to note, and one of them is the geographic isolation. I know we have 2 school districts in Windham Central who in the past have been identified as geographically isolated. That's possibly well, in fact, it is changing. There is supposed to be a new written criteria around what does it look like to be geographically isolated. I have some concerns, didn't really think about it at the time, but I have some concerns about the timeline of that being done. It's not actually supposed to be ready until 2019. We've been talking about it. I'm going to continue to pursue this. VSBA is looking at it. We would love to see the State Board of Education get that information to all of us ahead of time, earlier than 2019, because I think it's relevant for all of us, especially those who have in the past been geographically isolated. To be fair, I'm going to tell you, I was told over and over again while I was sitting in House Ed, there's only one school district in the state of Vermont that is truly geographically isolated. And I'm not going to name them, but they're nowhere near us. So I don't know whether that's true, because I'm not the one who puts those rules down. You know, it's going to be the state board who's defining that geographic isolation, so we need to work on that. The other thing I wanted to make sure people understood was the study committees. That Stephanie mentioned the side-by-side. Each entity that is assigned by one of the other sides would need to do their own study committee. A red would have their own study committee. A side-by-side would have their own study committee. I was actually in a little workshop breakout session up at the VSBA conference, And one of our other superintendents of Rutland SU mentioned that they are moving forward with side-by-sides. I think they're going to do a red and a side-by-side. And they said the way they've handled it is they're using the same consultant for both because each need their own articles of agreement. The way they're doing it is they meet the same night, they're using the same consultant, they're utilizing the resources of their superintendent and their business manager in the same location. They meet together first, then they meet separately and work on their own issues around that. So that's one of the ways. I think a lot of people misunderstand about what study committee is really required. I also think it's important you understand that a study committee is actually an entity upon its own. It's appointed by the individual school districts, and it does require that there is one school board member from each district on that study committee, but you'll also have a number of community members likely on the study committee, and they operate separately from your school board and your school district. So they will be an entity all upon themselves. And I don't know if anybody else has any other questions about study committee. There's a lot of questions that are still trying to be answered. I've been asked by several people, and I asked this up there at the conference. If you enter into a study committee, how do you get out of it? Can you move from one to another? Because honestly, it makes sense to me. The nature of a study committee is that you're studying and learning as you move on, and something may change. In fact, something may change after the accelerated movement goes forward too. Once school districts are either in accelerated or out of it, that opens up other possibilities for some of us who happen to be geographically near somebody who's either fails accelerated. So I think it's really important to find the answers to these questions. There's a little bit of dispute about how to get in and out, but everyone's telling me that you can get out of a study committee, but there may be some costs that are incurred by a school district in one study committee that they may need to pay that back if they leave it, go out. I think that the worst cost is the $20,000. It doesn't seem like, I don't think there's a school district in the room who decides they want to move from one to another who would say, I'm not going to pay the extra couple thousand or whatever it would take to move from one to another. So that's still being defined. If you have questions, ask. Nikki South, a part of the implementation project. She's the head of the implementation project. She's a huge resource. I ask her questions. She's got great answers. If she doesn't have them, she will get them for us. And VSBA, Nicole Mace, and Emily Simmons, who's the new attorney up there, they're both helpful as well. And I know many of you have used them because they've told me. They've had phone calls from all of you.
This is the connect.
Yep.
So with that being said, yes.
I'd just like to echo what I think Stephanie from Jamaica said. We either have to have a timeline on this, or we have to move on the side-by-side, because I know my tiny town of Brookline is asking, can you come and can you tell us what the SU is going to do? Can you know, there has to be a time frame.
Right, so that's where I'm going. So what do we want to do now? So we've kind of reviewed all the different options. We've talked about our values. We've had some conversations about it. We've got to hear from very learned people in the room tonight. We've had some questions thrown around. What are you, remember, it's not me or Emily or it's not Oliver or any of the legislators. It's us as a group. So what do we want to do as a group from the boards? Because it's got to originate from the boards. You're, I guess, saying that you'd be willing to look at a side-by-side, but that would be the one you'd be interested in. Are there people that don't want to do anything, don't want to look at anything? Is there people that want to look at something different? Where are we going and what are we going to do? Yes?
Just to add to the fray, the one thing that I'm missing here is, and I've mentioned this before, is the opportunity maybe even to check and study the amount of supervisory units in the state. There currently are 62 supervisory units in a state the size of Vermont. I think if money is to be saved, I think looking in that particular direction, there might be a lot of money to be saved, and with that, a lot of opportunity created for children and equity of education. If you can whittle down from 62 to 20, think about the money that could be.
Unfortunately, that's way above us, but if you talk to the person on your right, she may be able to help you with that.
Well, to be fair, we have reached out. And
Why
letters have
haven't we
gone,
studied
and
that?
Stevens had two SUs that have responded in a positive way that they want to have a
I gave you the
conversation with
notes.
us.
You all have the summaries of what
Yeah.
the latest report is, status as of today, regarding response from other SUs and other districts.
So
Without-
we have, and that's one of the things you folks asked us to do, the officers do, and we have done that. The thing is, you know, you can lead a horse to water, you can't make it drink. We can ask, but we can't make them come.
I mean, and the other thing that Rich said is true, legislature could do that. They could say, you know, if there's a proposal that's still sitting on the wall in House Ed to form 17 separate entities. I think we need to understand what that means if we do that.
That's what I mean.
And I-
Isn't there a way we could study that and see what
That's a
the
study, I
idea-
think, that's a little bigger than us.
You can reach out to the supervisory unions that surround, that one happens to be around tech centers. So you could reach out to the supervisory unions around your tech centers. That's kind of what we've done, except we've gone even a little farther than that when we've requested meetings. There didn't seem to be too much interest. I mean, there were a few people, few who wanted to talk to us, but they're also moving forward with their own
I don't
models
think
too.
there's much interest
Correct
in
me
the
if-
schools.
Well,
Why aren't-
well, go ahead.
I don't know that there would be much interest with the schools, except that we keep getting this dropped on our lap. So why isn't this packet dropped on the supervisory union? Like, why aren't they having to go through these same studies? You see what I'm
They
saying?
are. A
You're
bunch
saying
of
that
them
they're
already
not
are.
choosing to do it, but I don't think anybody here is necessarily, it almost seems like we're being forced to choose something. And I'm not saying.
No, we
that-
don't, no, I'm
no,
asking, what do you wanna do? So, do you wanna do nothing? That.
No, I'm not saying that, I'm just asking, is the supervisory unions, are the supervisory unions being asked?
Same thing we're being
Same,
asked.
okay.
Absolutely.
They're being told.
Everybody in the state.
Okay, and when do they have?
Some don't have to do much. Some can kind of just walk through this because they already are the preferred, which I hate that term, I'll just go right up front and say it, but the preferred model. An SD, if you're already in an SD that meets the number of students, you really don't have to do anything. But there aren't a huge amount of those. Most supervisory unions around the state are right in the same place we are, having the same
You
conversation.
know, like I said earlier, you know, Windham Southwest is doing a study. They're being able to study within Wyndham Southeast, the Brattleboro district.
looking at accelerated.
Is looking at accelerated. I know the.
Two Rivers.
Yeah.
Two Rivers.
So there are other supervisory unions. We did send everything south of Rutland, kind of.
Yeah, we
You know,
did.
do you want to come and meet with us? And we had two that responded positively. Again, we can't make them do it. And again, I'm not trying to force anything, and I have no particular, I have a personal opinion, but it's whatever you folks want to do. It's the majority you're going to rule.
Can I ask you a question? I mean, are we still moving, we did have two, that nobody could meet on the day that Stephen had proposed, but are we still going
We are
to
going to try to
try to
get a date
reschedule
together,
that?
right.
So
We should have some information on that, but most of these surrounding districts have kind of already started looking within, and that's what a lot of the people are doing, is they're starting within. Yes, sir.
I agree with Carolyn. I don't think any of these address the operational efficiencies or educational opportunities that we're really looking for. So at that point, it becomes practical. What's the most practical? What could we get through to our voters? And the side-by-side is the least disruptive. I think that's probably the path we need to go. And like we were talking about, this is probably step one. And the big elephant in the room is eventually there's going to be some closings of buildings. I mean, if we're talking about saving money, becoming more efficient, and increasing opportunities, that's, at the end of the day, you only get so much with sharing and governance. So that's,
So there's nothing, just so it's clear, it states specifically in the law, there's nothing in here about closing small schools.
Oh, of course
But
not.
I do want to, because you brought it up, I just want to mention it. This law hasn't really been acted upon. It's in law, but no district has voted yet. They're going to November 3rd, the first one. But two schools have closed recently, and we all know that. So I mean, I think that challenge to keeping small schools open is there whether Act 46 is in place or not. I think this is possibly the one opportunity that we can have to have a conversation to make sure those small schools are able to stay open by sharing resources, where right now it's a much bigger challenge for them to be able to do that. And I think you all probably heard about East Haven, who, you know, I happen to live many years up by East Haven and remember the small school pretty well. I lived in Burke, but you know, they're facing huge challenges right now after they close their school because people are moving into town and taking advantage of tuition options for them. So, I mean.
Which killed Windham.
Well, right, and I mean, all I'm saying is when we look at this, those are all the things that we need to be looking at. How does this impact us?
Right, but at the end of the day, our voters are going to vote on something, and it has to be, in my opinion, the most practical and least disruptive. And you're gonna get them the tax breaks, that's what they want, great. And then at some point, we need to move on to what is really gonna get us to.
Then that, whatever that governance model can then work on the cost effectiveness.
I hope the study will show both more educational opportunities. I mean, none of us don't really know until we study what's going to happen, but I think, you know, hopefully at the end of the study, you'll be able to show increased educational opportunities for our kids and maybe even some reduction in cost.
Can I ask, Stephanie, can I interrupt? Can I get one more person in front of you? We haven't heard anything from Marlboro, and every other school, town schools or school district has got to say something. And just because, like I said, we got one more important thing to do, so.
Well, I think this is just more difficult for Marlboro than for anyone else, which is why we're kind of listening. We've been, I would say Marlboro, although we're not, you know, officially studying, obviously, we're looking at all the different options and talking to schools outside the district as well, not necessarily knowing where that will go, but we're a K-8 with choice. No one else is a K-8 with choice in this room. So the side-by-side is a difficult road for us to just say, yeah, that's an easy path, because all of you, all the rest of you do it naturally and we don't. I think the most important thing for Marlboro in terms of a study committee is that we want to be sure that the study committees have enough flexibility that when we start going down the road of studying, if what we find out is that we need to join another school, another district that's all K-8s, or we find out that our town really wants Brattleboro Union High School, and, you know, or something else comes up that we don't even know until we start really engaging our town, what they care the most about. We need the flexibility to move within the study without penalties or disrupting the process. So I think that's been our most important sort of piece in terms of going forward. It's not stopping us from looking at what everyone's doing or being engaged in what's happening here, but it's just not as easy for us. So if we were going to join, we would just want assurance that we have flexibility.
And I think that would be, I mean, would I disagree if we all agreed to look into a side-by-side and do a study, and then something down the road comes up that may be a better fit for us, that we be allowed to move? I mean, I think, so that's something we should confirm and we should find out for everybody, because I bet you that would be a concern of every board.
I think it is a concern for every board personally. It's probably stronger for us, but I don't understand honestly why anyone would join a study committee right now when we don't know specifically and exactly what we're committing to. The answer has not been clarified for us yet. So that needs to happen, I think, honestly, for all of us, not just Marlboro, because we don't quite know what we're being locked into yet, as far as I can tell from the answers I'm getting when I ask the questions.
If I can just real quick, Steve, if we were to look into if we could find out from the powers to be, if we studied a side-by-side, but if we had it that would allow schools to move out if they find a better opportunity or something that's a better fit for them, and we got that as an affirmative answer, would that be where this group would want to move? Without any financial penalty, right? Okay,
we would have to move in the best interest of every district.
Right, so Stephanie's been had her hand up for a long time.
Yeah, and actually what I want to say kind of goes along with what a number of people have been saying. I've heard it said several times, especially when Oliver came and spoke at our town, when you were asking about other SUs, talking with other SUs. And what everyone keeps saying is erase the SU lines and really think outside the box. I've heard that multiple times. So I think it's up to each of us as districts. Even if this SU might not be partnering with a whole other SU, I feel that we as districts, and possibly Windham, might want to consider talking with other SUs. Certainly that's come up in Jamaica. And
So Marlboro's done that as well, all right.
Right, and I think Jamaica might not be as different from you. I mean, it seems easy to lock us into the Lillian and Gray union, however.
It's because it's a union school.
Right, and I get that it's hard to move away from that, but as a school board, our town, we had a number of people come to our school board meeting last week, and our town actually is pretty divided and has some very strong opinions, and they are not all saying that we should go into this nice, easy side-by-side. And I definitely would want to have flexibility in a study committee to move out and change positions for Jamaica.
There's one other thing I would say. I think the most important thing for Marlboro actually follows up on what a number of the legislators have been saying. Our town values our educational programming immensely. We had a community meeting. Tons of people came out. We asked them to give us all their questions to help understand how this was going. We got 80 questions back from our town. Like, they're engaged and they care. And the reason they're engaged and they care is because we have programs in our school that they really value. And I think people also value our K-8 structure. They value our school choice. And I really think our town is going to be very dedicated to, making sure that we can retain what we see as high quality programming, especially when it comes to the number of options we're able to give in our school right now when it comes to arts programming and other types of programming that some schools seem to call different special programs. Marlboro has a very strong value in our community on those programs, and our town is gonna really want that from us. So, there's a number of factors, the structure, the money, but really it's the quality of programming that our town wants us to retain. And that's, potentially challenging when more people have a voice in voting in our budget. So
over here we had a couple hands up. Bill?
Could I just kind of a clarifying question, and maybe the legislators know the answer to this? You guys are talking about the flexibility of the study committees and the eligibility for getting grant money for the study committees. Why do you have to do a study committee under those constraints?
That's the only way you get the money.
Is doing a study committee under that constraint the only path towards the end goals of these side-by-sides or the models? Or could this body simply decide, we want to create some study committees, we want to mimic, maybe starting out mimic the side-by-side, but you give yourselves ultimate flexibility because you'll have to pay for it. I mean, what are you paying for? You're going to pay for answers that you guys want known. Just something to consider.
So the AOE has input into this under, I think it's chapter 11 of Title 16,
Right.
Under the grants process of the study. So if your question is, do we want to forego the grant and move forward with a study of our own and pay for it ourselves? You'd have to ask up there and see whether they'd approve it, but it doesn't change any of the, I don't believe it changes any of the criteria we would have to, the law that we would have to follow.
Don't we get the unbiased, educated?
Bill, are you all set?
I am.
Well, I think Oliver's going to speak to it.
Yeah.
I was just going to say, nothing stops you, and in fact, I've been encouraging school boards to have informal conversations before you move to that formal stage, because the informal conversations are going to sort of help inform the direction you want to go with the formal study committee process. And I think that's, to some extent, already going on, and I would certainly encourage people to do more of that, because I think you'll learn a lot more through that process probably than the formal process.
And that's what we were trying to do, is that was everybody going back to get what that was values of their schools. And if we wanted to try to do the accelerated, we would have to move. Since we've taken that one off, there isn't as much of an urgency now, except that, all the studiers, if we wanted to get a study through the grant and through the SBA, this pickings get slimmer the further you go down the road.
Can I just follow one sentence on what Oliver just said? It's important to understand that the study committee is a pretty serious thing to be voting to get into. You shouldn't take it lightly. You should know what the partners that you want to partner with and what your goal is from your study. You really shouldn't be taking it lightly. It's a serious legal entity that will be moving forward in a certain direction. So I think that, what Oliver said is true. We're already doing it. These informal conversations are happening. I think they should continue to happen. They're happening at a local level, because I'll bet you every one of you are doing what Leland and Gray has done, and that's have a conversation even though we don't have a role, so to speak, in all this. But I mean, talk at your local level, talk at the SU level.
Okay.
Well, what I was saying is, when we have once you get into the study group, you have that facilitator who is more savvy to the ins and outs of each law and can help guide you in the direction you want to go. And that's the only benefit of that. Whereas we've discussed at our meetings, we've already discussed where do we want to go, what should we do, and I'm sure probably every board here has at some level discussed it already.
The financial expertise stuff.
Well, just where do we want to go when we come here and we're presented with this? Where do we want to go?
So, because that timetable, because that accelerated is gone and we're not that pushed on the timetable, the other option we all have is, I know Marlboro, I think, is when you see what happens with Brattleboro. I know you guys have been talking with them in Southwest. We were having some conversations with Wardsboro. I know, Emily said Leland Gray's talking. Jamaica's had public meetings. I'm sure Carolyn's gotten beat up at the store a few times. And everybody's, there is a lot of discussion, and this kind of discussions are really good too. Do we want to just hold off on any type of formal request for a study? Because it sounds like we've got a little bit more breathing room now if we're not going to push for the accelerated. We've got budgets coming up, we've got holidays coming up, and then we've got elections or re-elections, or people that aren't going to run or run for the door. And do we want to, again, maybe try to pick this up again in March, and then we can use town meeting to have a real good discussion about it with the people that actually come to town meeting to discuss it? Does that make sense to everybody? And then that gives us a little breathing room? Or does anybody see that as a problem, that we're getting too far behind the 8 ball?
The only thing I would suggest is that if the decision is to do what Rich just suggested and wait till March, I think that we all still need to stay in touch with each other, because if there's one of us who need to move forward for some reason or have communications in our communities, then we should be able to request a meeting of the SU to have that conversation.
And don't forget, we're going to be having a whole bunch of meetings. We're going to meet at least once in November and maybe twice in December to do budget, or once in December. So, Laura?
So I think one of the questions that we're wondering back here is, our board's willing to come back to our next meeting and maybe with an answer about where they're at in terms of next steps, things that they want to consider. I know we don't have a ton of pressure on us right now because we're not doing the accelerated, but I will say I was a little concerned actually today when I saw the email that Stephen sent out regarding the response around us. And I'm a little concerned that if in fact there is, and I think there is, opportunity to be gained in this act for some of our schools, I'm concerned that we are missing potentially opportunities to look bigger and think more entrepreneurially. So that's just a little concern that I have. Can I also do a 2-second commercial?
Well, let's stay on that topic for a second. Can we finish that? Because again, we've invited other boards, so we can try to get that meeting, pursue it harder, try to at least get the other supervisory unions that had said they would want to talk with us.
So the only one at this point is Windham Southwest.
Windham North.
Yeah.
East.
Northeast.
Yeah. I will say as a legislator, I saw that today, and I said to Oliver this morning when I'm like, I'm a little concerned actually about the impact that the accelerated merger process may be having on the big picture for areas that are a little challenged,
Right.
like ours.
And I would also say that that may change after March if an accelerated merger either doesn't, if
Yeah.
there isn't a vote in Windham Southeast, or if their vote fails. That, they may want to have more conversations, so that kind of takes us back to that timeline that Rich was suggesting.
I mean, the other thing is we can also plan on having, because remember, we got the 2 budget meetings, we got in November, they present the budget, we get to ask, we go back in December to vote on it because of, the schools that need to get that out earlier. Usually the voting part isn't as bad because we've taken our piece of Stephen and Bud out of them, in the November meeting. So maybe we could have our, plan on just an update where we all stand at that first December meeting, and then see where we're at, and then if we need to go further, we can move further then. Does that work for people? Does anybody have a problem with that?
I have a question.
Yes. Questions are free for the next 5 minutes.
So it tends to be people who are more engaged, more empowered, maybe often more advantaged, less distracted or engaged with just trying to get by. There's less representation from some of the disadvantaged families who I mentioned earlier, and I think it's very important for in each of your towns to be able to consider what potential impacts there may be for whatever kind of options or opportunities you're considering, particularly because it's the more advantaged families who are going to be speaking out, wanting more opportunities when the impact may be if their kids are pulled out of their communities, those who are left behind will be higher numbers of needy kids who won't be balanced by, as I said before, the more advantaged peers who bring everybody up to work together. And so I just think it's important that as we have our ears to the ground, hearing what are the sentiments of your community, to reach out to every different constituency. When Leland and Gray played Twin Valley, gosh, that was just yesterday, when we were creamed, the hundreds of people who came out to support your kids from all these different towns, and there's so much to a community school. We're talking 170 years, 180 years of history, of generations of supporting these kids who we love, and when we see them out on the field or on the stage, we're not thinking about their special needs, how much they're costing the school. We're seeing them as representatives and, in a sense, young statespeople doing the very best to represent their communities. And I really want us to keep that within sight.
Laura.
So I'm I know people are gonna bolt when we're done, since it's so late.
We have some really important we gotta do, so.
Okay, so I'm gonna do the commercial issues. Next Friday, November 6th, Ann Van Waring and I are sponsoring a meeting in Wilmington for all of our district towns to come and our communities to hear about the act, about Act 46, and then also for our boards to report out. We intend for everybody in the Windham Central Supervisory Union, all of you, to also be invited and attend. But we're doing this for our communities so that our constituents have an opportunity to ask questions and understand and really hear from their boards what's happening and what steps we're. Thank you, sir.
That's 6 p.m. at Memorial Hall.
In Wilmington.
Can you make the invitation on the email?
It was sent, was it sent out?
I sent it to Stephen, so.
I think it's gone out to everybody, but I'll do it again.
I got it, but
It's Friday the 6th.
If you got it, I have it.
So so if I could play benevolent dictator now, can we move forward then, and can we all agree that we need to kind of think about this, digest everything that was discussed tonight, and then we'll have a conversation about it at our November and December meeting? Is that okay? Is there anybody that is totally for, wants to make a motion to expend money and do a study on something? Laura's gonna make a motion?
She's gonna.
I move, maybe nobody will second this, that in December, all of our districts come back and answer the question, are you ready to participate in a study for a side-by-side district?
We don't actually, we don't need a motion, but is that agreeable with everybody?
It's not an obligation, I mean, are you ready? So, I mean,
Either yes or no?
I prefer March after town meeting. Just
We have a meeting
throwing
on
that out.
November 18th first, and
Right.
Laura's talking about the December 7th or December 9th.
And then that would be your answer at that meeting.
Oh, yes, it's so board.
Right, but I mean,
We all
that
have
could
time.
be, so that would be everybody's answer. Is that okay with everybody?
Just want to add one piece of information. I don't believe the law prohibits any school district from participating in more than one study.
Yes, I believe that is.
it
Is
does.
that true?
It
They
does.
have to
It
decide on one
does.
study?
Wait,
I
what?
don't believe you can.
Well, I know that Searsburg wants to study two things, but, you know.
Well, and maybe they're not getting a state grant, I mean, if they're funding it themselves or doing it themselves,
Well-
but that's the other question we need to find. and that
I'll
was-
try to find that out. I did advise the Marlboro board that I didn't see any reason why they, in their circumstances, it wasn't justified to study something with Brattleboro or study something with Windham Southwest K through 8 and study something with somebody else, because we're supposed to
You
let the SU boundaries
Study whatever you
dissolve.
want, but under the grant process, I believe this is.
So let's just, we'll find out, we can argue this back and forth, you know, we'll get an answer in writing, because the famous event is better than the finest of any memory.
We also have to answer the question from Mark.
Right, I got that.
Can we get can we get an answer on, what if we self-funded our own study, so that it was, we could make our own rules about coming in and coming out? Would that impact the tax incentive pieces? So if we self-funded a side-by-side study, so that Marlboro could say, oh, we'd like to be in, and then, oh, no, our situation's changed, we'd like to be out, and we all agree to that, can we do that and still be eligible for the tax?
Yep.
And again, it may be that we could also do a small study on whatever we want to study, and then if it's something that everybody's in agreement with, then we go get the real study from the Department of Ed, and half the work is done and move forward. So we'll get those, we got 3 or 4 questions, we'll get those answered, we'll get them out to everybody. We'll plan on December 7th, 9th, whatever the date is.
December 2nd or
December
the 9th.
2nd, we'll plan on everybody coming back, and we'll have a report out, we'll have a session on that, and I'm really sorry about holding everybody late, but I need a motion,
We can confirm it on the 18th.
and we'll confirm it in
November
November.
So we're now confirming that we will meet for the first reading of the budget on the 18th.
Is that good with everybody?
SU
November 18th for the
We
next
kind of
SU
set
meeting.
those dates a while ago.
We had them set tentatively, and we're just confirming that it's going to happen.
It's on your agenda.
Yes, Laura?
Excuse me,
We have
Rich, we have
principal
a Dover
search.
principal search that evening.
We'll have to
with
make
a
it
number of
work.
our school board members.
Yeah, Bill and I have been in
Presumably,
communication about that issue, but I didn't know that the meeting on the 18th for the SU was going to be confirmed until tonight. Now we know it is confirmed.
So we'll have to work around it. Yeah, we'll make it work. Okay, so I'd like to thank everybody, but I gotta kick everybody out but board members. No, I think, we had a summary of finances, and that was kind of there in case we decided to do a study too, and we had to fund it, so we're gonna hold off on that, and I guess we'll discuss
But can I
that.
just suggest that if anybody has questions about it? Well, or Rich.
Yeah, let me- So listen, if anybody has a question on the summary, send me an email, and I'll put it all together and give it to Bud. Hey, board members, please don't leave, I need a quorum. No. So what's gonna happen? Just board chairs, we'll just become an executive committee.